Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Naruto. I survive in the land of blood mist and Terumi is my fiance. Chapter 81. On the podium, Medical Jonin Arita was preparing the exam materials, and trainee medical ninjas who were going to take the medical ninjutsu exam also came to the classroom one after another. The training room had more than 30 tables and chairs, and soon they were all full. Wuxin looked around at the students around him. This time, the exam was jointly conducted by students who were in charge of other Jonins, and it seemed that there were also many new people, including Mihara Eri, who was Wuxin's subordinate during his previous mission. Mihara Eri was wearing a white coat, noticed Wuxin, smiled at Wuxin, and then quietly walked to the desk and sat down. Wuxin smiled back, which was considered a greeting. I haven't seen you for a while, Mihara Eri, seems to have changed a lot. Wuxin noticed that Mihara Eri seemed to have grown a lot taller. She was still a little girl a year ago, but now she has grown into a pretty beauty. It can only be said that at the age of development, if you don't see someone for a while, they may have changed a lot. After all the candidates arrived, Arita looked up at the examination room, scanned the room, and then looked at the clock hanging at the back of the training room, and said in a deep voice. Everyone is here, very good. After Arita stood up, holding a stack of test papers in his hand, and distributed them one by one in the front row of tables and chairs, and said, "Pass the test papers to the students behind." The test papers were passed around. Wuxin took the test paper, left his own, passed it to the back, and then looked at the test paper. Looking at it, it was very familiar, all of which were the content of the previous lecture, and some of the content of the previous textbooks, all of which were some knowledge that he had already mastered. Arita looked around the tables and chairs in the training room, and after seeing that all the candidates had received the test papers, he said loudly. This exam is divided into two parts. The first part is the exam on the content of the textbook. The second part is the practical operation of medical ninjutsu. This exam is related to your future career. I hope you will work hard instead of avoiding certain things in the Hidden Mist Hospital. Okay, this exam will take 100 minutes. Now that everyone has received the test papers, let the exam begin. Wuxin was checking the test paper. When he heard the words, he looked up at Arita. The so-called avoiding certain things generally meant that ninjas avoided certain dangerous tasks, but this was definitely not said to Wuxin. Wuxin replied softly. Yes, X35. All the candidates also agreed at the same time, and then took out their pencils and wrote furiously. The questions on the test paper were mostly about what characteristics of a certain herb, and what herbs can be neutralized with. Or how many meridians are there in the human body, and where are the most densely populated meridians in the human body. Or in a 4-person team mission, a teammate is seriously injured and bleeding, how should the medical ninja deal with it? For Wuxin, there is no pressure, and he fills in the answers quickly. Examiner Arita walked around in the training room, monitoring to prevent cheating, and stopped here and there from time to time. He walked to Mihara Eri, looked at Mihara Eri's answer, and commented. Well, not bad. Wuxin turned his head and took a look after hearing the voice, then lowered his head and continued to write. Time passed slowly, and Wuxin didn't use half of the 100-minute exam time, and he had finished answering the questions. Wuxin, who came to the Kurigakure Hospital to practice medical ninjutsu, was unparalleled in his dedication to medical ninjutsu. At the same time, Wuxin had experienced many S-level missions and had his own opinions on the emergency response of medical ninjas in missions. In short, this kind of test question was too simple for Wuxin. After Wuxin finished writing, he picked up the test paper, stood up, walked to the podium, put the test paper on the table, and said softly. Teacher, hand in the paper. Okay, sit in your seat and wait for the second round. Arita was standing next to a candidate, observing the candidate answering questions. Hearing Wuxin's voice, he looked up, replied, and continued to watch the candidate answer questions. Wuxin walked back to his seat slowly and observed the other candidates. Most of them were writing furiously. Only a few of them sat quietly, frowning, looking like they were thinking about the answer. There was even one person shaking his pen in the corner. Medical ninjas are protected by their teammates and provide medical support and logistics for their teammates. If the medical ninjutsu is not sophisticated enough, they will be protected and unable to play a rescue role. Then the party with such a burden will definitely be at a disadvantage in the ninja confrontation. Wuxin observed the abnormal conditions of several people, and after returning to his seat, he thought about it secretly. At the same time, he also understood which students Arita Nobuyuki was talking to when he announced the start of the exam. Even in the cruel ninja training system of the Hidden Mist Village, there are some opportunistic graduates. After completing some tasks and becoming a senior ninja, apply to join the Kurigakure Hospital or other Kurigakure departments and look forward to a stable life. Time passed slowly, and while Wuxin closed his eyes to rest, the exam was over, and Arita Nobu collected all the test papers of the candidates. Arita Nobu stood on the podium, and did not mark the papers on the spot, and said loudly, "Okay, the first part of the exam is over, and the second part begins." After Arita Nobu finished speaking, he walked down from the podium with a small bag, walked to the middle of the long table behind the training room, and took off the cloth wrapped in the box on the long table, revealing the contents of the big box. A cage with a few snow rabbits in it. The originally quiet snow rabbits squeaked when they saw the light. "Okay, students, turn around. The second part of the exam is about detoxification and first aid. Here are 6 rabbits, and I will inject them with toxins. You are required to use the technique of extracting the toxins from their bodies within 5 minutes and put them in this bottle. If the toxins cannot be extracted within 5 minutes, it will be considered a failure. Next, I will call on each of you to come up and practice medical ninjutsu." Arita Nobu loudly announced the content of the second part of the exam, and then took out some bottles and jars and several syringes from his small bag. Wuxin looked at the medical ninja Arita Nobu, who put the needle on the syringe, drew out a small half-tube of black liquid from a small bottle, grabbed a snow rabbit with one hand, and pushed the toxins into it with a syringe. Many female trainee medical ninjas frowned slightly when they saw this scene, as if they felt sorry for it. This toxin, a dose of 15 milliliters, will damage the brain nerves of a snow rabbit within an hour, causing sudden death. Once the toxin is injected, it will merge with the blood and become deeply rooted. Normally, it needs to be extracted 3 times in a row with the fine extraction technique to be completely removed. Your test only requires extraction once. Wrap the toxin with chakra and place it in this bottle. Arita Nobuyuki explained in detail, picked up the bottle of venom and shook it to indicate, then smiled and said, "Next, we will start calling the roll, Samehima Katsuya." Yes, in the corner, the candidate who had been chewing the pen tip, who had been noticed by accident before, responded with a lack of confidence. Yes, in the corner, the candidate who had been chewing on the tip of his pen, who Wuxin had noticed before, promised with a lack of confidence. Arita Nobu's toxin seemed to have a sedative effect. The snow rabbit injected with the toxin opened its eyes and lay motionless on the table. The student named Samehima Katsuya stood in front of the snow rabbit, took a deep breath, slowly formed seals with both hands, and after 9 seals, pressed his right hand on the rabbit. Wuxin watched this scene quietly. Wuxin, who was good at perception, could sense that the chakra control in his hand was not fine enough. The technique of extracting fine diseases, a high-level medical ninjutsu, can not only be used to remove toxins but also to replace organs. It is a technique with a clear practice method and requires continuous practice and experimentation. Wuxin, who has mastered the technique of extracting fine diseases and is very familiar with this technique, judged in a few seconds that Samehima Katsuya could not extract the toxins in the snow rabbit. Time passed slowly. Arita Nobu held a stopwatch in his hand, and looked at the student who performed medical ninjutsu from time to time, and his face was a little gloomy. "Time is up. You didn't even extract a trace of poison. 6 months of training, it's so unbearable." Arita Nobu's face was gloomy, his words were cold, and after a slight pause, he continued. "Katsuya Samehima, if possible, you should consider working in other departments." "Yes." Katsuya Samehima opened his mouth, wanting to explain, and finally turned it into a yes, and walked down with his head down. Among the candidates below, seeing this scene, many people covered their mouths and laughed. "You can leave after the second part of the assessment. Second place, Eri Mihara." Arita Nobu added a sentence about the exam rules, and then pointed out the name of the second candidate. Eri Mihara stood up from the desk, with black curly hair, youthful and beautiful, attracting the attention of many trainee medical ninjas. Eri Mihara walked to the center of the long table, looked at the white snow rabbit, fell into silence, without any movement, and seemed to be in a daze. Arita Nobuyuki frowned slightly and was about to urge her, but Eri Mihara made seals with both hands and started to move. Eri Mihara only made 6 seals, with her left hand maintaining the seal of the unknown, and her right hand pressing on the snow rabbit. Arita Nobuyuki was speechless. This was still the apprenticeship period, and she had simplified the seal of the fine disease extraction technique. He was a little overwhelmed by her audacity. He was about to criticize her, but saw Eri Mihara slowly raise her right hand. As Eri Mihara raised her right hand, white smoke and water vapor appeared on the snow rabbit, and the weak water vapor condensed into black water droplets under Eri Mihara's palm. As Eri Mihara controlled it, the water droplets absorbed the white smoke and turned into a walnut-sized water ball. The snow rabbit no longer emitted white smoke, and it jumped forward a little lively. Eri Mihara controlled the toxin and put it into the bottle very smoothly. Arita Nobu widened his eyes, looked at the gradually shrinking toxin ball dripping into the bottle in Mihara Eri's palm, looked at Mihara Eri's face, and then seemed to think of something, picked up the pocket watch to check the time. 1 minute and 21 seconds, genius. As Mihara Eri's toxin was extracted, Arita Nobu recorded the time, and this thought flashed through his mind. Then he picked up the pen, wrote an S after Mihara Eri's name in the rating column on the list, and said loudly, "Passed. Thank you." Mihara Eri had mist in her eyes, smiled at the examiner Arita Nobu, thanked her softly, and turned away. Wuxin watched this scene, noticed the mist in Mihara Eri's eyes, and knew why she was sad. The person she admired died because of poisoning and lack of medical conditions. It took more than a minute to extract the toxin. As Wuxin, who has also mastered this technique for a long time, is very clear about the difficulty. This technique, Eri Mihara, it's been more than a year, haven't you forgotten that mission? Wuxin was distracted for a moment. Teacher, who's next? Not only Wuxin was distracted, Arita Nobuyuki was also a little stunned. After hearing the question from the examinee, he reacted, picked up the list and looked at it, and said loudly, "Next, Anamura Nobuyuki." The examinee who heard the name was called stood up and walked to the long table. In the remaining assessments, no one was as outstanding as Eri Mihara. Most of them pulled out the toxin in about 5 minutes, which was in line with the normal test situation. Arita Nobuyuki's test purpose was to let them master this technique, standardize and spur them. There were fewer and fewer people in the training room, and in the end only Wuxin was left. Wuxin watched the examinees perform the technique of extracting fine diseases for a long time, and he really didn't expect that he would be the last one. After this test, most of them met Arita Nobuyuki's requirements. Only a few people were in the same situation as Samahima Katsuya before, and the toxin could not be extracted. They were so neat that they couldn't even extract any toxins. They were scolded by Arita Shin and advised to give up being medical ninjas. Wuxin, yes, Wuxin, who was called, replied and walked quickly to the long table. Without waiting for Arita Shin to speak, Wuxin made 5 seals with both hands, ending with the seal of no return. He maintained the seal with his left hand and put his right hand down on the rabbit. After a few seconds, Wuxin slowly raised his right hand. As Wuxin raised his right hand, there was also a thin white smoke or a vapor-like substance. The white smoke condensed into a black toxin ball under Wuxin's palm. Wuxin's right hand moved slightly, and the fingers gradually closed. In the end, only the tip of his right index finger was raised and erected, and a black toxin ball was slowly rotating in the air above the fingertips. Wuxin's right index finger was slightly bent, aimed at the bottle of toxins, and flicked lightly. The black toxin ball was directly shot into the bottle, performing a fancy detoxification. Arita Nobuyuki was not surprised at all. He was used to Wuxin's genius. This was why he kept Wuxin until the end, so that Wuxin would not hurt other trainee students. Arita Nobuyuki neatly wrote a big S behind Wuxin's name on the list to distinguish him from others. Just detoxify, why do you have to be so fancy? We are medical ninjas, and it is very important to make the injured feel at ease. What will the injured think when you are so fancy? You are poisoned, and I am detoxifying you in such a fancy way. What do you think? Arita Nobuyuki's words were a bit long-winded, and he had no dignity to treat other candidates. I know. I'll pay attention, Mr. Shin. Wu Shin nodded slightly, very respectfully, and then change the subject. However, Mr. Shin, did you time my detoxification? How many seconds did it take? About 30 seconds. This rabbit's poison is too simple. Next time, make something more complicated, a compound toxin. This toxin is indeed too simple for Wu Xin. It is not difficult at all, otherwise Wu Xin would not have done such a fancy thing. Arita Shin glanced at the time on the pocket watch in his hand, 37 seconds. What time is not time? The key is to detoxify the injured properly. After checking the time, Arita Shin closed the cover of the pocket watch and did not discuss this with Wu Xin. Night. In the courtyard of Wuxin's house, the moonlight was bright and the lights were shining. Wuxin sat on the eaves of the house, holding a frisbee in his hand. The ninja dog Wonkai beside him was wagging his tail and sticking out his tongue, looking at the frisbee in Wuxin's hand excitedly. Go! Wuxin threw the frisbee into the yard, and the frisbee spun and flew horizontally in the air. Wonkai barked, turned around and chased the frisbee, caught the frisbee in the air with a beautiful volley, and ran towards Wuxin excitedly. You are quite capable. Wuxin was very relaxed and took the frisbee from Wonkai's mouth with a smile. Bang! Bang! Is Wuxin here? Is Wuxin here? Outside the courtyard gate, there was a hurried knock and voice. Yes. Feeling this urgency, Wuxin was confused, but he responded loudly without hesitation, got up and jumped, quickly came to the courtyard gate and opened it. Outside the door, Katsuya Samahima was panting with sweat all over his forehead. When he saw Wuxin, he spoke very quickly. Wuxin, Director Arita Nobuyuki called you to gather at the hospital. There are a large number of seriously injured patients who need emergency treatment. Emergency gathering. Good. Wuxin was slightly stunned, and without asking any more questions, he walked out of the door and closed it. I still have to notify others, you go quickly. Teacher Arita Nobuyuki emphasized that you must go. Katsuya Samahima was panting a little. Seeing that Wuxin was moving slowly, he explained, then turned around and jumped away. Wuxin glanced at the direction where Katsuya Samahima left, turned around and rushed towards the direction of Kurigakure Hospital. This Katsuya Samahima was very thick-skinned. Arita Nobuyuki suggested that he should not be a medical ninja, but he refused to leave. Arita Nobuyuki was going to fire him directly, but he suddenly sent him to deliver the message, which made Wuxin a little confused. Speaking of which, in the past half-month, the number of injured people in Kurigakure Hospital has increased day by day. What happened? Wu Xin rushed all the way. Recently, the number of injured people in Kurigakure Hospital has increased, which is what Wu Xin noticed. This shows that Kurigakure ninjas are carrying out a large number of confrontational tasks between ninjas. B-level tasks are performed by Chunin level, and those above are led by Jonin level. Most of the tasks below B-level will not involve ninjas. Even if there are, they are mostly confrontations between genin. Genin level, generally there will be no casualties, even if there are, it is a minority. Wu Xin traveled very fast and soon arrived at Kurigakure Hospital. He went straight to his workplace, the 5th floor of the inpatient department. Wu Xin walked out of the elevator and walked quickly towards the medical room, ready to put on a white coat. Wuxin had just taken 2 steps when a nurse stopped him and said in a hurry. Dr. Wuxin, you are here. Master Fujishima Yuta told you to go directly to the emergency room of the outpatient department when you arrive. Okay, Wuxin replied, feeling the tension in the atmosphere, and walked quickly to the medical room, put on his white coat, and jumped down from the window on the 5th floor without taking the elevator. He jumped to the outpatient building in a few jumps. In the outpatient building, the lights were shining, and there were many injured people, some of whom were even leaning against the wall and could not wait for treatment. Wuxin, who had been in the Kurigakure Hospital for more than 9 months, was familiar with the terrain. He ignored the environment, turned a few corners, and walked directly from the emergency room doctor's passage to the emergency room doctor's office. In the emergency room office, Arita Nobu and another medical ninja were lying on chairs, their heads full of sweat, their eyes closed, and seemed to be resting. Teacher Nobu. Wuxin greeted softly. Arita Nobu opened his eyes after hearing the voice. After seeing Wuxin, he seemed a little excited and said in a hurry. You are here, hurry up, the injured person in bed number 12 needs emergency treatment. The 2 of us have swallowed the Bingliang pills and are waiting for the chakra to recover. You go to help him treat it. Okay. Wuxin said nothing and pushed the door open to enter the emergency room. In the emergency room, the beds are divided into 2 rows, with 15 beds in each row. There are injured people lying on the beds, and there are several medical staff in white coats next to each bed, performing medical ninjutsu or changing medicines. Wuxin walked straight to bed No. 12. The 2 medical staff next to the bed gave the injured an IV and injected medicine. I am a medical ninja, let me do it. Wuxin took over the work and looked at the injured person. He was wrapped in bandages all over his body, with only one right eye exposed, and the bandages were all stained red with blood, which shows how fierce their fight was at that time. Yes, the 2 medical staff spoke weakly and exhaustedly. After seeing the reinforcements, they finished the acupuncture work at hand and left directly. Wuxin walked to the hoist and took a look at the medical record. Name: confidential. Others: he suffered multiple serious knife wounds and kunai stabs during the mission. Although the wounds have been sutured, he has lost a lot of blood. Emergency blood and vitamin supplements may not be able to save the injured. He urgently needs medical ninjutsu to heal. Dark department. The names were kept secret. Wuxin guessed that it might be the Anbu, and didn't speculate too much. He directly removed the bandages of the injured. First the bandage on the head, the wound had been treated by medical ninjutsu and had healed. Wuxin started from the head and slowly removed the bandages. After the whole face of the injured was exposed, Wuxin felt that this face was familiar. Why does this face look familiar? No eyebrows. Quote. Although Wuxin was doubtful, he did not stop. He removed the bandage to the chest and shoulder. There were several horrible knife wounds, and the skin and flesh were turned outward and sutured. Wuxin made seals with his hands. After a few seals, he placed his hands in the air a few centimeters above the wound of the injured person, and green light shone. This kind of injury is very simple to treat with the palm fairy technique. In less than a minute, the horrible wound healed. Seeing this, Wuxin pulled the thread end and slowly pulled off the suture thread, and then continued to perform the palm fairy technique. Another minute or so, the wound was completely healed, smooth as new, and there was no trace of injury. Wuxin then tore off the bandage. There were 5 or 6 wounds on the chest and abdomen. Wuxin used the palm fairy technique to quickly heal them. After a period of treatment and blood injection, the originally pale face of the injured person became visibly ruddy. Cough, cough, water. The injured suddenly coughed and asked for water weakly. Wuxin ignored him and continued to heal the wounds on the injured's waist and abdomen. After the wounds were healed, he went to the doctor's office, brought him a bowl of water, adjusted the bed, raised the injured's upper body a little, and slowly fed the injured. This face. Zabuza. Wuxin served for a while, and then he found out who this person was. He had no eyebrows and hedgehog short hair. It's been more than 2 years, almost 3 years since I last saw him. This guy is taller and stronger. Wuxin didn't recognize him at first. Momochi Zabuza's upper body was treated. After drinking a sip of water, he slowly opened his eyes and glanced at Wuxin. His eyebrows without eyebrows wrinkled slightly, as if he was a little confused. Suddenly, Zabuza's eyes widened suddenly. Puff! The water that had just been drunk in his mouth suddenly sprayed out. He jumped up from the bed with a nimble figure and touched the ninja tool bag behind his waist. Hiss. Quote. Zabuza was wearing a patient's uniform, without any equipment. There was a large wound on his waist that had been sutured not long ago. When he touched it, his facial expression twitched. Lie down, Zabuza, I'm a medical ninja. Wuxin looked up at Zabuza standing on the bed with a blank expression, and spoke majestically. Zabuza narrowed his eyes slightly, looked around, and found that he was in the emergency room of the Hidden Mist Hospital, which he was quite familiar with. With doubts flashing in his eyes, he sat down slowly, but his body was tense and he remained alert. Zabuza had made many military achievements in the Anbu over the years, and had been seriously injured and sent to the emergency room of the Hidden Mist Hospital many times. He would not make a mistake in this environment, but the person in front of him made him a little confused. Wuxin was relieved when he saw Zabuza sitting down. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Zabuza say coldly, I want to change someone. Tisk, do you think this is a hot spring bath? You can change whenever you want. Sit tight. Wuxin didn't give in. He showed his doctor's style and directly rejected Zabuza's request. If conditions allowed, Wuxin wouldn't mind just leaving, but the wounded were overcrowded, and Arita Shindu had taken a soldier's grain pill to restore his chakra, so Wuxin had to take action and treat the wounded as soon as possible. Zabuza sat on the bed, with no intention of sitting down, his face full of vigilance. It's overcrowded, there's no doctor to change you, your upper body wound is healed by me. Remove the bandages on your abdomen and legs, and leave quickly after healing. The wounded outside are waiting in line for treatment, don't waste time, Zabuza. Wuxin spoke softly, explained briefly, and looked at Zabuza quietly. Zabuza had a blank expression on his face. He turned his head and looked around. After turning his head and taking a deep look at Wuxin's white coat, he took a deep breath and obediently removed the bandages. Zabuza had many wounds on his body, dozens of them, and many scars left by medical ninjutsu that were not treated in time. Wuxin didn't know what Zabuza had experienced in the past 2 years after graduation. Zabuza was a bit rough in removing the bandages, tearing the wounds and spilling blood. Wuxin was a little helpless. He walked forward and pushed Zabuza to the bed and carefully removed the bandages for him. After removing the bandages, Wuxin made seals with both hands. After a few seals, he pressed both hands on Zabuza's wounds. At a slight distance, he gently pressed on Zabuza's wounds that had been sutured not long ago. A green light appeared in his palms, and he performed a superb palm technique. Wuxin, who was working seriously, was very focused. He activated and healed Zabuza's many wounds. The wounds grew granulation tissue quickly, and the healing was visible to the naked eye. Zabuza felt the tingling and numbness of the wound, and the visible recovery, and looked at Wuxin with a complicated look. After more than half an hour of healing, all the wounds were treated and were as good as new, as if they had never been injured. After finishing all these, Wuxin breathed a sigh of relief. After seeing Wuxin stop moving, Zabuza gently twisted his arm, then raised his leg, and after feeling the recovery, he said, "Good medical skills, I am very satisfied. But, I am surprised that someone like you would join the Hidden Mist Hospital." Wuxin watched Zabuza move slightly, and his good recovery made Wuxin feel a little relieved. It was actually the first time for Wuxin to treat people with real swords and guns. Before practicing palm fairy techniques, he used rabbits, fish, and mice to experiment with medical ninjutsu. Hearing Zabuza's words, Wuxin smiled and said, "Zabuza, we are classmates after all, and we are more or less familiar with each other. How do you feel? Are you feeling uncomfortable?" The word, classmate, made Zabuza stunned for a moment, and his eyes gradually became fierce. Then he seemed to realize something, glanced at Wuxin's white coat, and said coldly, "HMPH, I'm fine now." After saying this, he got up from the bed, put on his slippers, and left directly. Zabuza seemed to be quite familiar with this place, and walked straight to the door of the emergency room, opened to the injured, unlocked it and left directly. Wuxin looked at Zabuza's back and smiled. Wuxin now no longer has the urgency to improve his strength during the ninja school period. Now that he is familiar with ninjutsu and even medical ninjutsu, Wuxin has the confidence to protect himself. Zabuza, who had not been seen for a long time, was much taller. Wuxin, who was good at perception, could sense that Zabuza had a huge amount of chakra, which was incomparable to the time when he graduated. Wuxin was not surprised by this, because his chakra was no less than his. "Save me, it hurts." In the emergency room, the wounded cried out. After Wuxin saw Zabuza leave, he heard the call and immediately started to treat the next wounded. The lights in the Hidden Mist Hospital were on all night. At dawn, in the emergency room of the Hidden Mist Hospital, Wuxin stood in front of the bed with a pale face, and put his hands on the wound of the patient on the bed. Green light emanated from his palms, and the green light slowly faded away. After the medical work was completed, Wuxin took down the medical record on the hoist, took out a pen from his white coat, and quickly wrote down his treatment situation. After recording, he stumbled back to the infirmary. Treating dozens of people overnight, although there are people taking turns, Wuxin can't bear such a workload. In the infirmary, Arita Nobuyuki also looked pale, with bloodshot eyes. He glanced at Wuxin, who walked into the infirmary, and said softly, "Thank you for your hard work, Wuxin. Our team has completed the task today. You can go back to the dormitory to rest." "Yes." Wuxin was as if he had been pardoned. He hurried to the doctor's passage and left quickly. Wuxin had been in an apprenticeship state before, I was on duty tonight, and I was called up urgently due to special circumstances. Wuxin left the emergency room of the outpatient department, took off his uniform in the medical room on the 5th floor of the inpatient department, and went downstairs to the main door, ready to go home and rest. At 6 o'clock in the mist village, the sun had not yet dispelled the fog, and it was gray. Wuxin walked out of the gate of the mist hospital and looked back. The gray mist hospital had almost lights on in every building. I've been in the mist hospital for so long, and this is the first time I've seen this. This special situation, combined with the increase in the number of injured in recent times, Wuxin guessed that something might have happened in the village. However, Wuxin understood that these had nothing to do with him for the time being, so he shook his head and turned to walk towards home. Swish! Wuxin! A masked figure fell from the sky and landed on the street, about 5 meters away from Wuxin, and directly called out Wuxin's name. Anbu! Wuxin took a look at the man and had already guessed what was going to happen next. Mizuguchi-sama has summoned you, please go immediately. Okay. Wuxin nodded without further ado and turned to head towards the Mizuguchi building. Wuxin's chakra and physical strength had reached their limits after working overtime all night, but the summons from the Mizuguchi could not be delayed, so he hurried all the way and headed towards the Mizuguchi building. Mizuguchi building. Outside the Mizuguchi's office, Wuxin knocked on the door. Come in. A familiar voice. Wuxin pushed the door open and walked into the Mizuguchi's office. Mizuguchi-sama. Wuxin, I'm sorry to disturb you from practicing medical ninjutsu. The village is short of power and needs your strength. The Mizuguchi Yagura was also pale and his eyes were swollen, as if he had stayed up late. He got straight to the point when he first saw Wuxin. Please give the order. Wuxin was calm. There were a lot of Kurigakure ninjas lying in Kurigakure Hospital. There must be a shortage of power in this situation. Please give the order. Wuxin was calm. There were a lot of Kurigakure ninjas lying in Kurigakure Hospital. In this situation, there must be a shortage of power. Kuroju Yagura glanced at Wuxin up and down, then took out a scroll from the drawer, put it on the desk, pushed it forward, and said, A-level mission. It's best to capture the target alive. If that doesn't work, you can bring the body back. Go, don't let him escape. Kuroju Yagura has been the Mizuguchi for a long time. His delicate face is full of majesty. He is not as polite as usual, and he gives orders very straightforwardly. Yes, Wuxin agreed softly, strode forward, and picked up the scroll on the table. After opening it to check the content of the mission, he nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, Please rest assured to leave it to me. Well, if it's you, of course there will be no accidents. Wuxin, there are many more missions like this. The village is short of power at present. I'm afraid you can't continue to study in the ninja hospital. Kuroju Yagura leaned back on the sofa while speaking. His pale face showed that he had not been very idle recently. Mizuguchi Yagura meant to transfer him out of Kurigakure Hospital to perform tasks for him. Wuxin could understand his implication. Wuxin's medical ninjutsu training was almost complete, and the rest was experience, which could not be rushed. After a little thought, he said in a deep voice, I have already mastered the basic medical ninjutsu. The village needs me, so I should contribute my strength. If you have no objection, that's the best. Don't be careless when performing tasks, go ahead and return as soon as possible. Yakura leaned back on the sofa chair, speaking softly. Yes, Wuxin responded softly, put the task scroll in his arms, and turned to leave. Wuxin, who left the Mizuguchi building, went straight home. Although he was going to perform a task, he still had to rest. The task was to assassinate the samurai attendant of the Minister of Defense of the Water Kingdom, a samurai named Guanji-yu Masahiro. The Minister of Guards has many connections with the village, and this Guanji-yu Jungyu is suspected to be a spy from another country. He secretly steals intelligence from the Hidden Mist village by taking advantage of the convenient identity of the Minister of Guards and Defense. The Hidden Mist village generally does not interfere in the affairs of the court of the water country, let alone assassinate officials of the water country. Of course, this is generally the case. Although the assassination mission in Wuxin's hands is suspected, it should be possible to have evidence. The time requirement is to complete it within a week. In terms of time, Wuxin can make it in time. Sharpening the knife does not delay chopping wood. Wuxin thought about the details of the mission and hurried all the way back to the mansion. Wuxin, who had been up all night, returned to the bedroom, covered himself with a quilt, and fell asleep. It was hot in summer, and it got dark later. At dusk, Wuxin, who had slept for a day, woke up slowly. Wuxin, who was lying on the couch, looked out the window. The sunset dyed the sky golden. Even if he had slept for a day, Wuxin still felt a little tired. It can be seen that staying up late, even if you make up for the sleep during the day, the energy you can recover is limited. Wuxin shook his head and got up, put on the black combat uniform, took out the long-lost vest from the closet and put it on, put the big scroll on the table on his back, and hurriedly left home. Wuxin shuttled between the eaves of the houses on the street and headed straight for Takeuchi Weapon Shop. At dusk, at Takeuchi Weapon Shop, the owner Takeuchi Taro was fanning himself and checking today's accounts. He got up from the chair leisurely, picked up the long hook at the corner of the rolling door, and pulled down the rolling door. After closing the store, Takeuchi Taro clapped his hands and picked up the fan on the side. As soon as he turned around, he ran into Wuxin dressed in ninja clothes. Taro Takeuchi was somewhat stunned. He looked Wuxin up and down and teased. "Tisk tisk, what a rare guest. Isn't this Wuxin? You still remember this little shop?" Wuxin smiled awkwardly and explained softly. "Uncle Takeuchi, Kurigakure Hospital is busy with affairs. I have no choice. Look, I came here today." Since Wuxin joined Kurigakure Hospital, not only did he help Taro Takeuchi to look after the shop, but he also often had no time to forge weapons 3 times a month. On the 1st, 11th and 21st of each month, the Takeuchi forging room started forging. Wuxin had skipped work for 2 months because of the busy affairs of Kurigakure Hospital. Most of Taro Takeuchi's ninja tools were imported, and the number of ninja tools he made himself was only a small number of the total amount of goods. Even so, Wuxin was often absent. "Aren't you working at Kurigakure Hospital? Why are you wearing this outfit? Are you going out on a mission again?" Taro Takeuchi noticed Wuxin's ninja outfit and asked softly while shaking his fan. "Hey, uncle, I'm going out on a mission. I have some time before the mission, so I came here to make a treasure for the store." Wuxin came here to make a treasure mirror that can perform the water mirror technique. Here, the words are slightly embellished. When Takeuchi Taro heard this, his dissatisfaction with Wuxin's continuous skipping of work immediately dissipated. He raised his hand and nodded Wuxin, saying, "You are a little bit conscientious." "Hey, don't say that, uncle. Kurigakure Hospital is very busy. You know it. I am practicing medical ninjutsu. When I have mastered medical ninjutsu in the future, you and Aunt Dama won't even have to go to the hospital for medical treatment." "Hey, that sounds good. I'm afraid it will be difficult to find you by then." "Oh, no, you are still very diligent when you ask for salary." Takeuchi Taro and Wuxin walked side by side, talking and laughing all the way, and walked towards the forging room of Takeuchi Taro's mansion. The sunset stretched the shadows of the two people very long. Dusk had arrived and it was not far from dark. When the sky gradually darkened, the two arrived at the forging room of the mansion. Although Wuxin's main goal was to forge a treasure mirror for himself, he even brought the mirror template. But before that, Wuxin was ready to do his best to add to the inventory of Takeuchi Taro's weapon shop. The forging room was brightly lit, and the sound of ping-pong forging continued until there were fewer pedestrians on the street and the moonlight was bright, and the forging sound stopped. In a few hours, 5 banana leaf fans and 2 jade bottles were forged, as well as thousands of shurikens and kunai. "Okay, let's do this for today. There are still a lot of stocks in the store. Mainly fans and bottles, these are treasures." After forging, kunai and shurikens were piled on the ground casually, and the newly forged fans and bottles were placed on the table. Takeuchi Taro carefully checked them and stopped forging today. "Well, make another treasure." Wuxin wiped the sweat off his face and suggested softly. "Well, you want to make up for the vacancy in the weapon shop today. It's up to you. Do you want to make a banana leaf fan or a jade bottle?" Taro Takeuchi was a little surprised, but he had no opinion on making a treasure. "Hehe, neither, make a mirror." Wuxin replied with a smile, then took out a small scroll from the tactical pocket of the ninja vest, opened the scroll and placed it on the table. He pressed his palm on the font of the scroll, and a small mirror similar to a table tennis paddle appeared with smoke. Water Country. Maida Castle. Madian Castle is the territory of the Nida clan. The current head of the family, Nida Yukibe, serves as the Minister of Defense of the Water Country Court and is very powerful. The residence of Nida Yukibe in Mission Castle covers a very large area and raises many ninjas and samurai. Regardless of their strength, the number is quite large. Nida Yukibe's residence is in the southeast of the city, which is quite remote, but the streets are very spacious and there are many houses of retainers around. On the roof of a third-floor house nearby, Wuxin lay on the tiles and quietly monitored the gate of Nida Yukibe's residence. At the gate of Nida's residence, a young man wearing a black turban, a green traditional samurai suit, and a long sword on his waist walked out of the residence with a long toothpick in his mouth. This outfit, target Guanji Yu Zhengyu. When Wu Xin saw the man's outfit, he checked it with the photo on the mission scroll in his mind and confirmed that it was the outfit the target liked to wear, and the habit of holding a toothpick in his mouth was also consistent. Guanji Yu Zhengyu was a little sloppy, with a long sword on his waist. After leaving the Xintian family's mansion, he walked into the street, walked slowly along the street, and gradually merged into the downtown street. In the downtown, people came and went, and there were many kinds of leisure shops nearby. Guanji Yu Zhengyu walked on the street and stopped in front of a gambling house. Master Guanji Yu, hey, what wind brings you here, please come in. The servant in front of the gambling house bent over and greeted him with a smile. No, I have other things to do. Guanji Yu Zhengyu arrogantly rejected the servant's invitation and strode away. Wuxin performed the transformation technique and stood in front of a small stall not far behind Guanji Yu Zhengyu, disguised as a passerby, holding a toy. He kept an eye on Guanji Yu Zhengyu. Seeing that Guanji Yu Zhengyu did not enter the gambling house and went forward, Wuxin immediately put down the toy and followed silently. Guanji Yu Zhengyu turned left and right along the way, and soon came to a small road with few people. On the small road, only Wuxin, who performed the transformation technique, followed Guanji Yu Zhengyu. Guanji Yu Zhengyu held a toothpick in his mouth and walked slowly forward. When he came to a fork in the house, Guanji Yu Zhengyu suddenly dodged to the right and rushed into the alley. Wuxin immediately dodged forward and looked into the alley. The alley was blocked by a wall at the innermost part, but there was no figure. Climbed over the wall and escaped. Wuxin quickly ran to the wall deep in the alley and looked around at the nearby houses. After searching around, Wuxin found no trace. He clasped his hands together and prepared to perform the perception technique. A voice came from behind him. Swish. Hey, why are you following me? Who sent you? On the house next to him, Guanji Yu Zhengyu jumped down from the house and blocked Wuxin's retreat. Guanji Yu Zhengyu's actions were exactly what Wuxin wanted. Wuxin was not afraid of fighting, but that the other party would blend into the crowd and escape without a fight. Wuxin performed the transformation technique, and his appearance was that of a farmer. Seeing that Guanji Yu Zhengyu did not run away but confidently blocked the road, he was moved and said coldly. Guanji Yu Zhengyu, you betrayed the master and stole secrets. Tell me, what is your real purpose? Guanji Yu Zhengyu heard this and sneered. His right hand slowly touched the handle of the knife on his waist and said. Childish, since you don't tell me who is behind the scenes, don't blame me for being cruel. Wuxin stretched his right hand behind his waist, summoned a kunai from the sealed wristband tied on his wrist, and then touched it in front of him. Guanji Yu Zhengyu saw Wuxin take out the weapon, his eyes narrowed slightly, lowered his body, and slightly bent his knees. Wuxin held the kunai in his right hand, and saw Guanji Yu Zhengyu's posture. He recognized it as a samurai's sword drawing technique at a glance. The corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a sneer, raised his hand, and shot the kunai in his hand towards Guanji Yu Zhengyu. Swish, clang. Guanji Yu Zhengyu reacted very quickly, slightly sidestepping the sharp blade thrown by Wu Xin, and disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, he was already behind Wu Xin. He raised the long sword in his right hand, made a beautiful knife flower, and then slowly sheathed the sword. Bang! The farmer who was cut in half by the sword turned into a wooden stake, and the cut of the wooden stake was divided into two halves from the lower left to the upper right, and the cut was extremely smooth. Guanji Yu Zhengyu noticed this scene, and his leisurely and slow sword retracting movement suddenly accelerated. After putting away the sword, he summoned a kunai with a detonating talisman with his hands like a magic trick, and shot it towards the door of the house on the left. Thump thump thump. The kunai had great power and shot directly through the wooden door and into the house. After 2 breaths, a violent explosion occurred, the fire shone, wood chips and tiles flew everywhere, and the house was blown up. You are not a samurai after all. In the alley, Wu Xin's voice came from all directions, making it impossible to tell the location. You can dodge my sword with the substitution technique, and you can survive the explosion. You are not an unknown person, please tell me your name. Sakiya Masahiro's face was serious. After a single fight, he realized that the enemy was not simple. The one who wants to kill you. Wuxin's voice came from all directions, and at the same time, fog suddenly emerged in the alley. The fog quickly rose and diffused, making the naked eye visibility in the alley no more than 10 meters. Time passed by minute, and Guanji Yu Zhengyu, whose vision was blocked, did not dare to change his position at will. He held the long knife and was extremely alert. It's over. Guanji Yu Zhengyu heard Wuxin's voice in his ear. Guanji Yu Zhengyu was a little unbelievable. He slowly turned his cheek and looked to the right. What he saw was a young man's profile. Swish. Wuxin swung the kunai without hesitation and wiped Guanji Yu Zhengyu's neck. The toothpick in Guanji Yu Zhengyu's mouth fell. Bang! Guanji Yu Zhengyu, whose neck was wiped by Wu Xin, turned into smoke. At the same time, the toothpick that fell also turned into a young man wearing a green vest, a mask, and short brown hair with a bang. Guanji Yu Zhengyu held a kunai in his right hand and quickly stabbed Wu Xin's face. Ding! Wu Xin's left-hand kunai slashed horizontally, separating Guanji Yu Zhengyu's attack, and at the same time raised his right foot and kicked Guanji Yu Zhengyu fiercely. Guanji Yu Zhengyu's right-hand kunai was separated by Wu Xin, and he ignored Wu Xin's right foot. Following the force generated by twisting his waist to the right due to the separated kunai, he threw a powerful left hook at Wu Xin's face. Bang! Wu Xin's right foot just kicked Guanji Yu Zhengyu's lower abdomen, and his right face was hit hard, and he was punched in the air. Wu Xin quickly adjusted his body shape and landed. Looking at Guanji Yu Zhengyu's clothes, he guessed his background. Green vest, plus the shadow clone just now. This guy came out alone today. He must have realized something. He was dressed neatly and must be preparing to evacuate, but he was entangled by Wuxin. Wuxin's right hand glowed green, and he rubbed his right face. Before being hit, his face had condensed chakra, so this punch was not a big deal. However, in the close combat of physical skills, Wuxin still suffered a loss, and he also knew that the man in front of him was superb in physical skills. Although Wuxin kicked him, he was much taller and stronger than Wuxin, and Wuxin's kick had very limited damage to him. This was the difference in size and physical strength. The Hidden Mist Village sent a little kid like you. Are you ready to face death? Guanji Yu Zhengyu looked fierce, staring at Wuxin's iconic vest and forehead protector, as well as his thin body that was not commensurate with his strength. Wuxin didn't care about Guanji Yu Zhengyu's pretending to be calm, and stepped back and disappeared into the fog. Konoha Ninja, throat, cervical vertebrae, lungs, liver, carotid artery, subclavian artery, kidney, heart, 8 vital points. Where do you want me to attack? The alley was already remote and narrow, and after being blocked by fog, the visible range was extremely low. Combined with the words coming from Wuxin from all directions, it put a lot of psychological pressure on people. Ha ha ha, whatever you want, if you can touch me. Guanji Yu Zhengyu's vision was almost deprived, but he didn't care at all, but laughed in response. Swish, 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 ding, ding, ding. Guanji Yu Zhengyu, who was crawling on the ground, quickly got up, drew the knife at his waist, and blocked all the kunai shot by Wuxin. Your behavior and your words really bring me joy. In the mist, Wuxin's words came from all directions. This Guanji Yu Zhengyu, his words were strong, but his actions left a shadow clone in the original place. His real body crawled on the ground, trying to touch the wall to escape. The mist was shrouded, mixed with the mist of perception. His every move was under Wuxin's eyes. This funny scene made Wuxin couldn't help laughing. Guanji Yu Zhengyu did not respond. He held the ninja sword in both hands, tilted in front of him, with a posture of concentration and vigilance. Time passed slowly, and the sounds coming from the mist from time to time gave Guanji Yu Zhengyu great psychological pressure. Guanji Yu Zhengyu gritted his teeth and said loudly, "Little ghost, you are still a little naive to kill me." I originally wanted to spare your life. Since you are stubborn, don't blame me for being cruel. As soon as Guanji Jungyu finished speaking, Wuxin in the thick fog responded to him. Swish, 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 ding, 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 puff. In the thick fog, a large number of kunai suddenly shot from the left from top to bottom. Guanji Jungyu was alert and focused, blocking with his long sword, but was still hit by 2 kunai and pierced into his vest. Hiss. Guanji Jungyu took a breath, stuck his long sword into the ground, formed a seal with his hands, squatted down and pressed the ground. Earth escape. Earth formation wall. Boom. The ground cracked, mud and rocks bulged, and turned into an earth wall more than 20 meters high. Guanji Jungyu jumped a few times and climbed up to the top platform of the earth wall. The fog did not cover so high, and the vision suddenly became wider. The earth wall was towering, and although the fog could not cover it, a more bizarre situation appeared. The clear sky was filled with snowflakes. Snow. Snow on a sunny day. Are you from the Snow Clan? Guanggu Masahiro saw the snowflakes around him and asked. As soon as he finished speaking, he found that ice cubes grew strangely on his feet, and his legs lost consciousness and could not move. The freezing started from the feet and spread upwards. Calves, knees, thighs, hips, waist, chest, neck. Guanggu Masahiro felt that he was frozen and his body could not move. The only eyes that were not frozen were wide open, as if he could not believe it. Wuxin quickly rushed to the top of the earth formation wall, and saw that Guanggu Masahiro's eyes were dull. He confirmed that he was hit by his illusion, the mist magic prison, and rushed forward with a kunai in his hand, stabbing Guanggu Masahiro's throat without hesitation. Swish. When Wuxin's kunai was about to pierce Guanji Jungyu's throat, Guanji Jungyu twisted his neck in an emergency, and the kunai scratched the side of his neck, but did not penetrate him. Puff. After Guanji Jungyu dodged, his eyes were fierce, and he raised his right knee and blasted towards Wuxin's left half of his body, which was close at hand. Wuxin blocked with his left hand, but the muscle density and strength of his arm were far less than that of his thigh. Wuxin felt a sharp pain in his left arm after the knee collision. Die. After Guanji Jungyu raised his knee to hit, the ninja sword slashed at Wuxin from bottom to top. The knife penetrated Wuxin, but Wuxin's whole body suddenly turned into a pool of clear water and scattered on the ground. Water substitute. Impossible. Guanji Jungyu was shocked to see Wuxin turned into clear water, but he reacted quickly and jumped back. The clear water scattered on the ground surged strangely and condensed into the appearance of Wuxin. The strangeness of Wuxin's ninjutsu made Guanji Jungyu feel more pressured. In the close combat just now, Wuxin was no less shocked than Guanji Jungyu, and shouted. You can actually break my jutsu. Water escape illusion, fog illusion magic prison, A-level illusion, is a jutsu that exceeds the level of Jonin. Ordinary ninjas can only be lambs to be slaughtered in front of this jutsu. This level of illusion was actually broken by such an unknown person. At this moment, Wuxin has realized that Guanji Jungyu is not simple. He can cast shadow clones and earth formation walls, and his chakra is not bad. He is definitely not a ninja rookie. Guanji Jungyu did not answer Wuxin's words, his eyes were shining with a strong fear. He raised the long sword in his right hand, pointed the tip of the sword horizontally at Wuxin, and shook the long sword slowly. This strange action made Wuxin alert, and he took out the treasure mirror he made a few days ago from the micro seal on his left wrist. 3000 mirrors, a mirror that can assist in the water mirror technique, in Wuxin's opinion, is much more effective than Yagura's hook. As long as chakra is injected, it will work immediately when facing the enemy, and there is no need to make a seal. You are very strong, but it's over. Guanji Masahiro shook his long sword a few times and said this abruptly. Wuxin held the mirror in his left hand and became more alert to see what kind of swordsmanship he was going to launch. Konoha style. Willow. Guanji Masahiro whispered softly, and as he spoke, Wuxin felt that Guanji Masahiro's shaking long sword seemed to have turned into a willow branch. And the willow branches became more and more numerous and longer. At a distance of 10 meters, the willow branches spread rapidly and wrapped Wuxin's whole body. Can't move. Wuxin, who was wrapped in willow branches, could not move his body and instantly realized that this was an illusion. What frightened Wuxin even more was that the chakra in his body was disordered as if it was not his own chakra, and he could not mobilize even a little bit. Guanji Yu Zhengyu's long sword trembled, and his figure was like a dancing willow branch. Following the trajectory of the shaking willow branch, he approached Wuxin in 2 instants and slashed at Wuxin's neck with a sword. At this moment, Wuxin understood the reason why the A-level illusion mist magic prison was cracked by the opponent. The opponent was also a master who was good at illusion. Wuxin, who was on the verge of despair, bit his tongue with his understanding of illusion. When the long sword finally slashed towards his neck, he regained control of his body and stretched out his left-hand mirror to block the long sword as a shield. Clang! In the small round mirror of the 3,000 mirrors, a long sword strangely extended out, breaking through the mirror, exactly the same as Guanji Yu Masahiro's attack trajectory, blocking Guanji Yu Masahiro's slash. Swish! Wuxin jumped back and distanced himself from Guanji Yu Masahiro. At this moment, Wuxin no longer underestimated this Konoha ninja. This man must be a well-known Jonin of Konoha, and definitely not a mediocre person. Guanji Yu Masahiro's unique skill was broken, and it was broken by an extremely strange ninjutsu. He was even more surprised. After seeing Wuxin jump back to dodge, Guanji Yu Masahiro also jumped back without hesitation, then turned around and ran away directly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Want to escape? Can you escape? Along with Wuxin's words, countless kunai shot at Guanji Yu Masahiro's back. Want to escape? Can you escape? Accompanied by Wuxin's words, countless kunai shot at Guanji Yu Zhengyu's back. Guanji Yu Zhengyu turned around helplessly, waving his long sword to block the kunai, but there were too many kunai, and 2 more were stabbed on his vest, and he couldn't help but groan. Wuxin held the kunai with both hands, stopped Guanji Yu Zhengyu and did not attack him. He stood quietly and watched a few meters away. The kunai were all coated with the 3 deadly poisons. If he was not treated in time, he would die within a day. Wuxin was not in a hurry to catch him. The main purpose was to entangle him and prevent him from escaping. As long as Guanji Yu Zhengyu kept refining and activating chakra, the poison would attack faster. Guanji Yu Zhengyu was breathing heavily, holding the long sword with both hands, blocking in front of him, and the several kunai wounds on his vest dyed the nearby green vest red. Although Wuxin looks small and young, he is one of the toughest people in Guanji Yu Zhengyu's many years of ninja career. The two faced each other on the earth wall, and the battle stopped for a while. The nearby citizens, who were attracted by the explosion before, saw the earth and rocks rising and changing the terrain, and realized that it was a ninjutsu confrontation between ninjas. The crowd panicked and fled the vicinity. You are a genius for being able to force me to this point at your age. However, it's almost over. Let me show you my unique skills. Guanji Yu Zhengyu spoke coldly, loosened the handle of the knife with his left hand, and stood up with his index and middle fingers in front of him, forming a half-unknown seal. Wuxin knew that the man in front of him was not an easy person to deal with, and the mirror of the treasure mirror in his left hand was aimed at him, waiting for him to launch an attack. The greatest function of the 3,000 treasure mirrors is to respond to changes with the same attitude and break the opponent's powerful attack with less chakra consumption. Bang! Bang! Smoke rose from the left and right of Guanji Yu Masahiro, and a clone appeared on each side, and 3 Guanji Yu Masahiros raised their long swords. Konoha-style sword art, 3-day moon dance. Accompanied by Guanji Yu Masahiro's shout, 3 figures quickly attacked Wuxin from the left, right, and center. The clones he created could cause wind noises when they ran. Wuxin understood that this was not an ordinary confusing clone technique, but a high-level ninjutsu of Konoha, a technique to create real shadow clones. HMPH. Water Mirror Technique. Wuxin, who had been concentrating and on guard, snorted coldly, and the mirror was always looking at Guanji Yu Masahiro. With the transmission of chakra, 2 Guanji Yu Masahiros rushed out of the small round mirror, and the way they attacked was exactly the same as the opponents, and they all caught them accurately. Ding! Ding! There was a clanging sound of sharp blades clashing, and the replica in the water mirror turned into clear water and fell to the ground, while the 2 Guanji Yu Zhengyu on the opposite side jumped back, their wrists shaking, and the powerful attack of the weapons seemed to cause discomfort in their wrists. Sacrificing the car to save the king, interesting. Wuxin looked at the 2 Guanji Yu Zhengyu shadow clones and couldn't help laughing. The Guanji Yu Zhengyu who attacked in the middle rushed halfway, braked suddenly, turned around and ran away, with extremely fast speed, jumping directly from the pile of earth and rocks, with smooth movements. Because of his escape, Wuxin's 3,000 mirrors only copied 2. Wuxin made seals with both hands, and with Wuxin's movements, the nearby water vapor condensed into 4 groups, and the 4 groups of water vapor turned into water waves, and the water waves turned into Wuxin's appearance. The 4 water clones rushed up quickly and fought with Guanji Yu Zhengyu's shadow clones. Wuxin's real body took the opportunity to pass by and chased in the direction of Guanji Yu Zhengyu's escape. The water clone cannot be too far away from the main body. Wuxin used the water clone not to destroy the opponent's shadow clone, but to entangle the opponent. Wuxin jumped down from the earth array wall and rushed all the way to the busy market he had passed by before. The originally bustling market was now extremely quiet. Because of the fighting between Wuxin and Guanji Yu Zhengyu, all the people nearby were scared away and hid. Wuxin closed his eyes and performed the perception technique while chasing Guanji Yu Zhengyu's escape direction. In such a short time, he ran a kilometer away. Wuxin's original circular perception could only perceive the 2 Guanji Yu Zhengyu shadow clones behind him. After concentrating the perception waves in one direction, he found Guanji Yu Zhengyu. In such a short attack, he had already fled a kilometer away. No, Wuxin rushed all the way and suddenly stopped, frowning slightly. The 3 Guanji Yu Zhengyu were all real in the perception technique. This Guanji Yu Zhengyu was extremely cunning. The suspicious Wuxin was a little worried about the 2 behind him, and his hands quickly formed seals. Hai Shu Yu Shen Wei. Spiritual technique. Woof. Accompanied by smoke, the ninja dog Wonkai appeared in the smoke. Wonkai, take me to find him. Wuxin quickly took off his vest and used the left side of the vest was facing Wonkai's nose. Wuxin's left side had been bombarded by Guanji Yu Zhengyu before, and his smell remained. Woof. Wonkai's nose twitched a few times, and with a woof, he ran in the direction behind Wuxin, where Wuxin was chasing. Is it really a trick? Wuxin's eyes were wide open, and he turned around in disbelief. He didn't expect that the one who escaped was actually a shadow clone, and Guanji Yu Zhengyu's real body disguised as a shadow clone and stayed in the same place. Wuxin's previous pursuit was very fast. In a short while, he rushed hundreds of meters away, and the connection with the water clone had long been lost. Once the water clone loses contact with the main body, it will turn into clear water and scatter. Wuxin returned to the original route and returned to the remote alley of the market. While running, he performed a fan-shaped perception technique in the direction of Wonkai. 200 meters, 500 meters, 1,000 meters, Guanji Yu Zhengyu's shadow clone, which could be sensed before, could not be sensed at all at this time. Woof. The ninja dog Wonkai led the way, running happily all the way. As a ninja dog trained since childhood, Wonkai also has chakra in his body. Although he can't make hand seals to perform ninjutsu, chakra can help strengthen his body and sense of smell, which is very helpful for ninjas. 1 man and 1 dog came to the previous fight. The earthen wall had disappeared due to the dissipation of chakra. As for Guanji Yu Zhengyu's figure, he had long disappeared without a trace. Wonkai's nose twitched, and he wandered around nearby. Then he barked and ran forward. Wuxin immediately followed. The man and the dog quickly ran out of Madian City, came to the outside of the city, and shuttled through the forest. Every few minutes, Wuxin performed a perception technique, but he couldn't find Guanji Yu Zhengyu's figure. Wonkai, it's all up to you, don't let him escape. Wuxin jumped on the branches of the forest and solemnly admonished his beloved dog. Woof. The ninja dog Wonkai responded very cooperatively, speeding up, sticking out his tongue, and jumping on the branches of the forest. After more than 10 minutes of rapid tracking, there was still no trace of Guanji Yu Zhengyu. Escaped so fast, I'm afraid he spared no effort to refine chakra. Unfortunately, the more chakra you use, the faster you die. Wuxin and Wonkai were moving fast, already in a state of rapid march. In this case, Wuxin still couldn't sense Guanji Yu Zhengyu, which shows how fast he escaped and how much chakra he consumed. Using the instant body technique to escape can indeed quickly escape from the enemy's pursuit. Unfortunately, he had long been infected by Wuxin's poison. Woof. Wonkai, who was jumping on the branches of the forest, turned his head and woofed, indicating that Wuxin was close. Well, I found it. Wuxin understood and responded softly. In the range of the perception technique, on a stone pier in front of the forest, Guanji Zhengyu was sitting on the stone. Hey, you can't run anymore. Wuxin, who detected Guanji Zhengyu, understood that Guanji Zhengyu was in a very bad state at the moment. He was hit by 4 wounds from the kunai, bleeding, and was poisoned by Wuxin's 3 ultimate toxins. After being poisoned, he fled without sparing chakra. It must be said that his escape strategy was very successful. He could have escaped Wuxin's pursuit, but he died of poison in an unknown place. Unfortunately, Wuxin was not a fool. Although he was tempted by the shadow clone and chased the wrong person, he reacted very quickly, and with the help of the tracking ninja dog, he followed the smell to track the real body. On the stone pier at the edge of the forest, Guanji Zhengyu's face was distorted. He endured the pain and pulled out the kunai on his body, then bandaged the wound with a bandage. During the previous escape, Guanji Zhengyu bandaged his wounds while running. Now that he was safe, he bandaged the wounds again carefully, trying not to let the wounds affect his subsequent actions. The pursuit ninja of the Hidden Mist Village, it seems that my identity has been exposed, and I can't stay in the land of water anymore. After Guanji Zhengyu bandaged several wounds on his upper body, he took out a jar from the ninja bag behind his waist, took out a small black pill from the jar, and swallowed it. Although I lost a lot of blood, I can make up for it quickly with the effect of the blood replenishing pill. Fortunately, I got rid of that troublesome kid. Guanji Zhengyu thought about the next strategy, scratching his neck from time to time, and then scratching his arms. Why is it so itchy? There are mosquitoes in this season. No. Sakiya Masahiro scratched his head and thought about the way out, and suddenly his expression was stern. He thought it was because of the weather and mosquitoes when he was itching on the road. Now that he had traveled so far, the itching symptoms became more and more serious. Sakiya Masahiro realized that things were not that simple. Is the kunai poisoned? Sakiya Masahiro took out a small paper bag from his ninja tool bag, took out a pill from the paper bag, and swallowed it. Detoxification pills can relieve the toxicity of the poison. For simple and weak toxicity, they can even be directly removed. They are essential ninja tool medicines during ninja missions. After repairing, Sakiya Masahiro picked up the kunai that he had pulled out and thrown on the ground, and looked carefully at the kunai blade. The black kunai had extremely fine granular stripes on the blade and tip. If you don't look carefully, you can't see them at all. At this age, and so tricky, it seems that this person is the prodigy of the Hidden Mist Village, the genius ninja Wuxin. Sakiya Masahiro's mentality has changed from not caring at first, to realizing that Wuxin is not a rookie and taking him seriously, and now it has changed to a strong fear. This kid is not easy to deal with, it is not advisable to stay here for a long time. Sakiya Masahiro did not dare to rest for too long. He used the kunai in his hand to dig a small hole in the ground, buried the 4 kunai pulled off his body and the simple bandages he had made on the road before, and covered it with soil to cover his traces. Boom, boom, rumble. At the edge of the forest, a violent explosion sounded suddenly. Hearing the sound, Sakiya Masahiro looked up at the forest not far away. A series of explosions caused a huge fireball. Chasing. The trap set by Sakiya Masahiro was triggered. He realized that the enemy had chased nearby. He did not dare to gamble whether the trap would kill the enemy. He turned around and retreated directly. Located at the edge of the forest, the terrain is flat. Although there are some strange rocks standing there, it does not affect the vision. Guanji Zhengyu is very fast and rushed out more than 100 meters. Guanji Zhengyu ran fast, always feeling that something was wrong, as if something was passing by him. Guanji Zhengyu looked around, everything was normal on both sides, and there was nothing. Guanji Zhengyu, who was eager to escape, suppressed his uneasiness and continued to rush forward. Whoosh! In front of Guanji Zhengyu, the pursuer Wuxin suddenly appeared. Wuxin had a red ribbon tied around his waist and held a kunai in both hands. He shot at Guanji Zhengyu at a very fast speed. Swish! The sharp blade of the kunai pierced Guanji Zhengyu's left arm and shoulder socket. Guanji Zhengyu dodged the attack to his throat in an emergency, but his left hand was severely injured and lost his ability to move. At the same time, his body was also hit by Wuxin's powerful force and flew into the air. The red ribbon on Wuxin's waist quickly shrank. Not far behind Wuxin, a light wave flashed and a huge green lizard appeared out of thin air. The attack just now was the lizard's spiritual tongue ejection, which helped Wuxin launch a rapid. After Wuxin successfully used the summoned beast to severely injure Guanji Yu Zhengyu, he swung his arm and shot dozens of kunai at Guanji Yu Zhengyu in midair. Behind Wuxin, the lizard's tongue, which had just been retracted, quickly shot out again and swept towards Guanji Yu Zhengyu. Puff, swish, puff, swish. Guanji Yu Zhengyu in midair had nowhere to borrow strength, and relied on instinct to pull out a kunai to block several kunai shot by Wuxin. However, Wuxin's attacks were closely connected, and Guanji Yu Zhengyu was eventually stabbed with more than 10 kunai, and was severely injured again. Just after the attack of the ninja kunai, a flexible and long tongue attacked again. Guanji Yu Zhengyu could not resist and was entangled by the tongue. Swish! Wuxin saw the opportunity without hesitation, and rushed into the air in an instant, and a kunai pierced Guanji Yu Zhengyu's throat, ending Guanji Yu Zhengyu. Guanji Yu Zhengyu's eyes were wide open, blood was dripping from the corners of his mouth, and his hands bound by the lizard's tongue twitched, as if he wanted to break free and pull out the sharp blade on his throat. Bang! After the lizard's tongue bound Guanji Yu Zhengyu, it fell heavily to the ground, then retracted into its mouth, rushed forward quickly, ran behind Wuxin, and stood guard to help Wuxin. After a series of blows, several vital points were hit, and he was thrown heavily by the lizard. Guanji Yu Zhengyu's eyes were wide open, looking at Wuxin, and the light in his eyes slowly disappeared. Wuxin made a seal with his left hand, and a water clone condensed out. Although the enemy was most likely dead, Wuxin did not dare to be careless and used the water clone to check the body. Wuxin's water clone came forward and stripped Guanji Yu Zhengyu's clothes, leaving only a pair of shorts. After confirming that Guanji Yu Zhengyu was dead and there was no danger, Wuxin strode forward. Lizard Maru, you've worked hard. Go back. I'll go to the sea country to grill fish for you in a few days. Wuxin, standing in front of Guanji Yu Masahiro's body, turned his head and said something to the summoning beast chameleon, then retracted his gaze and looked at Guanji Yu Masahiro's body. The chameleon made a sharp hissing sound, and turned into smoke and dissipated with a bang. Wuxin looked at Guanji Yu Masahiro for a few times, squatted down and lifted Guanji Yu Masahiro's body up to sit cross-legged, and then formed seals with both hands. Ninjutsu. Mind-reading technique. A ninjutsu that can sneak into other people's brains and read their memories without any equipment. Wuxin's left index finger and middle finger stood upright in front of him, and his right hand pressed on Guanji Yu Masahiro's head. Let me see your memory. Hidden Mist Village. Mizukage Building. Wuxin walked forward with 2 scrolls in his hands, placed the scrolls on Mizukage Yagura's desk, and said softly. Mizukage-sama, the mission is completed. Here is the mission report and the target's body. The target's body was sealed in the sealing scroll by Wuxin. There is evidence that this person is a high-ranking member of an organization, and his skills must be strong. However, no matter how strong he is, with the genius of our Hidden Mist Village, his fate has already been determined. Mizukage Yagura had a warm smile on his face, praised softly, reached out to pick up the scroll that Wuxin had placed on the table, opened it and carefully examined it. From Konoha. I originally thought it was from Kumogakure. Torichi Kumadera, Konoha's special jonin, came to Water Country a year ago to perform spy missions. The noble lords in the capital court are really at their wits' end. When they see someone with good skills, they want to recruit him as their disciple without investigating his identity. Ha! The words of Mizukage Yagura jumped a lot. At the beginning, he was still interested in spy affairs, but at the end, he ridiculed the nobles in the Water Country court. Although I have mastered the art of mind reading, searching memories is a time-consuming and laborious task after all. I can only roughly search out these. The rest, I'm afraid, will have to be analyzed by the corpse disposal team. About the village and the court, Wuxin couldn't make any comments, only talking about his own mission. Guanji Yu Masahiro is the pseudonym of Konoha's Torichi Kumadera to perform spy missions. Torichi Kumadera is 18 years old. In the ninja world, if you can live to the age of 18, you are already a senior ninja. The corpses of ninjas are very valuable. The popular ninjutsu of the forces they belong to can be analyzed from the corpses and cracked accordingly. However, the Fire Country Konoha village is located in the central area of the ninja world, and there is also the famous Uchiha clan who is good at copying, so Konoha village has a wide variety of ninjutsu, and it does not have unique ninjutsu like other ninja villages. It can also be understood that each ninja in Konoha village has his own characteristics. Wuxen's mind-reading technique focuses on digging out the ninjutsu of Yushi Kumadera. When Wuxen checked his memory, he basically glanced over what information Yushi Kumadera had stolen. Wuxen recorded a copy of Yushi Kumadera's swordsmanship, Konoha-style illusion sword, earth release ninjutsu, and shadow clone technique on a scroll. This is Wuxen's own property, so he naturally won't be stupid enough to hand it over. When fighting with Yushi Kumadera's Konoha style, Lu caused a great shock to Wuxen. If he didn't have many trump cards, he might have been killed in one move. Konoha style. Lu, illusion swordsmanship, level A, ultimate swordsmanship. In Yushi Kumadera's memory, this move of his killed at least 10 ninjas, it was his real ultimate skill. Wuxen roughly browsed through his memory, and a superficial search showed that he killed more than 10 enemies with this move. If he looked through his memory carefully, there might be more souls killed by his sword. Mizuguchi Yagura checked both scrolls, especially the mission scroll, and browsed it again. This time, the browsing was not as casual as the last time Wuxen reported on the mission of the Snow Clan. Well, Konoha has a special Jonin, whose strength should not be underestimated. You can kill him, and if this deed is publicized, it will make you more famous. Besides, you have the ability to kill him, so it is not appropriate for you to be a chunin. After putting down the scroll, Mizuguchi Yagura raised his head and looked at Wuxen carefully, scanning his eyes up and down, as if observing Wuxen's height. After looking at him twice, he continued. Wuxen was born on July 10, 36th year of Kurigakure, and graduated as a genin at the age of 9 in January 45th year. In the same year, he was promoted to chunin in September. You have been a chunin for less than 2 years. If you are promoted to jonin, it may cause some criticism. Mizuguchi Yagura read out Wuxen's resume like a treasure, touching his chin with his right hand, as if considering the impact of promoting Wuxen to jonin. Wuxen remained silent and did not answer. Whether or not the level is not important to Wuxen, in this ninja world, improving strength is the kingly way. Now Wuxen is thinking about how to digest and master the illusion sword recorded in the memory of Yushi Kumadera, Konoha style, Lu. Under 12 years old, 11-year-old jonin, ha 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 ha, although it will cause some criticism, it can also enhance the confidence of the Hidden Mist village. However, under the fame, it will inevitably attract the enemy's targeting. Wuxen, do you want to become a Hidden Mist jonin? The Mizuguchi Yagura seemed to think for a while, and at the end, he asked Wuxen's thoughts. Hearing Yagura's question, Wuxen smiled and said softly, "Everyone in the Hidden Mist village, treat me as a genius." Although such attention is a bit stressful, it is also a motivation. However, whether I will be employed or not ultimately depends on you, Mizuguchi-sama. As for me, it's up to you. Quote, the jonin level is very different from the chunin level. Jonin can participate in the election of Mizuguchi, and can recommend themselves or nominate others. The number of jonin votes in the jonin class is a force that everyone who wants to become a kage cannot ignore. The jonin of the 5 major countries are generally famous, and most of the ninja villages have some understanding and records of each other's jonin. There may be some rookies among the genin, and there will be differences in strength among the chunins, and there will definitely be no easy people to deal with. They can perform powerful ninjutsu, superb physical skills, and weird illusions, and they are often good at more than one ability and have rich experience. Jonin is the top ninja on which the ninja village depends for survival, and will never be an unknown person. You should have some ideas of your own. Don't you think you are a tool in the blood mist period? Quote. Yakuro was very satisfied with Wuxen's attitude, but his words sounded like teaching. After a slight pause, he continued. Then I will appoint you as a special jonin. With your strength, you can share more affairs for the village. Quote. Yes. Wuxen nodded and agreed softly. Most chunins perform tasks below B level, while A level and S level tasks are prepared for jonin. The benefits of jonin are good, but it is not so easy to get by. It is now the end of June, and July 10th is Wuxin's birthday, and he will be 12 soon. As for the chakra volume and strength of adult ninjas, Wuxin is very aware of his shortcomings. Due to his age, he is slightly lacking in this aspect. Wuxin can find that his chakra volume increases every once in a while. The use of ninjutsu and the range of perception are evidence of Wuxin's chakra growth. Wuxin, who still has room for growth, does not want to lick blood on the edge of a knife too early, and needs to grow a little. The fourth generation Mizukage Yagura is obviously in a good mood. Seeing Wuxin's indifferent look, he chuckled and said, "Hey, Wuxin, don't be so indifferent. The third cage of Sand Village in the Land of Wind has disappeared. It is suspected that Konoha did it. We have officially declared war on Konoha to avenge the third cage. Due to internal reasons, our Kurigakure village did not participate too much in the Second Shinobi World War. This time, in the Fire and Wind War, our Kurigakure village cannot do nothing again. We must make up for the village's obscurity in the Second Shinobi World War. The name and majesty of Kurigakure village need our strength." Quote. Chapter 91. Yagura's words surprised Wuxin. When he was in Kurigakure Hospital, Wuxin noticed something unusual, but those things he saw and heard were not as good as what the Mizukage Yagura said. The disappearance of the third cage was the trigger for the Third Ninja World War. This was a landmark event. Wu Xin wanted to confirm it and asked back. "The third cage is missing. The Sand Village declared war on Konoha." "Yes, intelligence shows that the two countries have already fought in the territory of the river country. The third cage, known as the strongest cage in the history of the Sand Village in the Wind Country, is not only powerful but also has excellent governance capabilities. The Sand Village has grown rapidly in his hands. Originally, there was constant friction between the Sand Village and Konoha. Now with the disappearance of the third cage, the war was directly triggered, and the Sand Village assembled an army to retaliate. However, Konoha was able to assassinate the third cage. It must be said that it is worthy of being the most prestigious ninja village." Yakura answered softly, and in his words, he seemed to believe that the third cage was killed by Konoha village. During the time of the third cage, due to the growth of Sand Village, the third cage was ambitious and repeatedly provoked frictions on the border of the Land of Fire. For such a leader, Konoha village must have wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. Although there is no evidence that the third cage was assassinated by Konoha, anyone with a discerning eye can guess the mastermind behind it. After all, whoever is most beneficial to the disappearance of the third cage is the most suspicious. And who is most beneficial to the disappearance of the third cage who has repeatedly attacked Konoha? Obviously Konoha. Konoha, Wuxin murmured. Wuxin knew the reason for the disappearance of the third cage. The murderer was the grandson of Chiyo, the elder advisor of Sand Village, and was done by Scorpion of the Red Sand. He silently assassinated the third cage and transformed the third cage into a puppet. After doing this, Scorpion of the Red Sand patted his butt and left Sand Village, and began to pursue the value of existence and strive for the cause of art. Yes, Konoha is powerful and has many masters. If this kind of thing is well planned, it is possible to do it. Moreover, other villages besides Konoha will find it difficult to do it. Seeing Wuxin distracted, Yagura lost interest in communication and changed the subject. "Well, you've worked hard after the mission. Go back and rest. After a week, prepare for the next mission. This time, in the Fire and Wind War, it's time for our water country to show its strength." Wuxin was not distracted, but thinking about the disappearance of the third cage. This was the fuse of the Third Ninja World War. The water country intervened and the three major countries participated, so it could be regarded as a ninja war. Wuxin admired Yagura's ambition to interfere in the affairs of the ninja world, but Wuxin had more important things to do at this time, so he bowed slightly and said, "Yes, go." Yakura waved his hand, picked up the other scrolls on the table, and started working. "Yes." Seeing this, Wuxin turned around and left with a promise. Wuxin left the Mizukage building and headed towards the training ground in the southeast of the village. During this assassination, he read a lot of Konoha-style ninjutsu, such as the shadow clone technique that Wuxin had been interested in for a long time. The target of this mission, Yushi Kumaid, has a lot of ninjutsu reserves. He is good at earth escape ninjutsu, swordsmanship, illusion sword, and the shadow clone technique circulated among Konoha's senior ninjas. This is what Wuxin wants to master the most at the moment. Wuxin thought about the new ninjutsu in his hand, and quickly ran to the training ground, jumping and shuttling from the eaves of the village. After a while, he arrived at the destination. The C3 training ground in the southeast forest of Kurigakure village is Wuxin's favorite place to practice ninjutsu. There are rivers, game, and wooden targets. Wuxin walked quickly forward, jumped, climbed onto the stone pier beside the stream, took out a scroll from the ninja tool bag behind his waist, and opened it to read. The shadow clone technique, a physical clone, can help you practice as long as you have enough chakra and energy. Wu Xin muttered softly after reading the contents of the scroll. Wu Xin has long heard of this ninjutsu. The technique that Naruto, the protagonist of Naruto, is good at is also a technique that Wu Xin already knows quite well before he practices it. Naruto, the protagonist of Naruto, defeated countless powerful enemies with the shadow clone technique, and later practiced the nature change of chakra through the shadow clone technique and developed the wind-style Rasenshuriken. All of this is inseparable from the shadow clone technique. However, this technique is listed as a B-level Jonin level technique by Konoha, and there is a reason for it. Multiple shadow clone techniques are listed as A, indicating that this technique is somewhat dangerous. All the experiences of the shadow clone can be transmitted back to the main body, but it is not a good thing for the human brain to receive too much information and memory at the same time. On the way back from the previous mission, Wu Xin just briefly read the record of the technique and did not practice it specifically. This time, Wuxin finished reading the scroll, thought about the pros and cons of the shadow clone technique for a while, and began to refine chakra in his body. Wuxin's chakra follows the requirements of the shadow clone technique, and he puts his index and middle fingers together, stands in front of him, and forms a rather unique plus-shaped hand seal. Shadow clone technique. Bang, bang, bang. Under the stone pier where Wuxin sat, smoke fluctuated, and 3 Wuxin shadow clones emerged from the smoke. Wuxin and his own shadow clones looked at each other, staring at each other. Is this the shadow clone technique? It is indeed very different from the water clone. Wuxin, who successfully practiced it easily, compared the shadow clone with the water clone in his mind, and the chakra in his body fluctuated, cancelling the shadow clone technique, and the 3 Wuxin shadow clones turned into smoke and dissipated. It seems that I don't need to control it specifically, it's really like an independent body. The water clone is just a clone technique mixed with water escape, using water to build a clone. In fact, it is not much different from the clone technique of the genin. The water clone built with water has weight in its attacks like a solid entity, and it can quickly establish a numerical advantage in battle. However, the disadvantage is that it cannot be too far away from the main body, and although the attack has weight, its strength is too limited. Wuxin compared and analyzed the water clone and shadow clone techniques in his mind, and had a deeper understanding of the application scenarios of these two techniques. The shadow clone is more useful, but the shadow clone has to divide the chakra of the body equally. The strength of the water clone is limited, but the amount of chakra deployed is controlled by the caster. Shadow clones are more suitable for transmitting information, exploring the way, etc., because shadow clones have independent consciousness and can act away from the main body. Water clones are suitable for using less chakra to establish numerical advantages or confuse opponents, and they will not divide the chakra equally like shadow clones. After Wuxin studied it for a while, he put the scroll of shadow clone technique into the ninja tool bag behind his waist and took out another scroll. Konoha style. Unagi, the ultimate sword technique. It deserves this title. This ninjutsu scroll is the unique skill of Yushi Kumate, Konoha style sword technique, Unagi, the sword of illusion. This ninjutsu scroll is the unique skill of Yushi Kumate, Konoha style swordsmanship, Willow, the sword of illusion. The caster shakes the weapon, like a swaying willow branch, and unknowingly launches a powerful illusion. Then he imitates the trajectory of the swaying willow branch and kills the enemy instantly. As the description of this technique, it is a sure kill sword. However, if you face an illusion master, the time for the illusion to fix the enemy will be unstable, just like Wuxin broke free from the illusion at the last moment. Originally, Konoha-style Willow was a swordsmanship that would kill the enemy even if the enemy broke free from the illusion at the last moment, because there was no time for him to react to cast ninjutsu and resist. Unfortunately, Wuxin has many life-saving trump cards. Even if he does not use the 3000 mirrors, only using the water transformation technique, Yushi-kumate still cannot kill himself unless he is completely trapped in the illusion and loses consciousness. After studying the scroll, Wuxin jumped off the stone pier, took out a kunai, held it with both hands, and shook it gently, imitating the shaking of the weapon when Yushi-kumasho attacked. After shaking for a long time, the chakra could not escape like a willow branch as described in the scroll. Wuxin tried hard for a long time, but he couldn't get the point at all. He also realized that this technique was not so easy to master. After all, it was a technique with a learning difficulty of a level. Wuxin stopped shaking the kunai in a funny way, put the kunai into the ninja tool bag, and thought. The kunai is still a little short, I have to get a long sword to use. Physical skills and swordsmanship require hard work to consolidate the basics before you can make any achievements. Such a strong swordsmanship, if you don't learn it, it's a bit of a waste. Where should I find a swordsmanship teacher? Wuxin thought for a while, and the first person he thought of was his former instructor, Murayama Yuto, who was a powerful ninja who was proficient in water escape and illusion. I haven't seen him perform swordsmanship, but he has superb physical fighting skills, so I think he has some understanding of swordsmanship. Teacher Yongren has taught me a lot of skills. It's time to give back and study with him. Wuxin had an idea and decided to find a helper. He simply dealt with the traces of training nearby, turned around and ran into the village, heading straight to the east area of the village. He hurried all the way and finally arrived at the gate of the Yuto Murayama mansion near noon. Teacher Yongren. Bang, bang, Wuxin shouted and knocked on the door gently. There was a sound of opening the door in the courtyard, followed by a sound of footsteps. The courtyard door opened. Yuto Murayama had a bandage wrapped around his face and his left arm was hung by the bandage. He looked seriously injured. Wuxin was surprised to see Yuto Murayama like this. Teacher Yuto, what's wrong with you? Mission, you almost lost your teacher, come in. Yasuto Murayama waved his right hand at Wuxin, turned and walked into the courtyard, took 2 steps, turned his head and looked at Wuxin, and said softly. I wanted to take you with me on my mission, but I looked for you in the village for several times, but I couldn't find you. Did you go on the mission too? Yes, the Mizukage summoned me, and I went to help the Mizukage solve his problems. Wuxin felt ashamed to see Yuto Murayama like this. He was used to being alone, and he didn't even think of notifying his teacher Yuto Murayama when he went out. Looking at the left arm of Yuto Murayama hanging in front of him, Wuxin whispered. Teacher, my training at Kurigakure Hospital has been recognized by the medical ninja Rita Nobu and Mizukage. Your arm is broken, let me heal you and restore it. Wuxin has been training at Kurigakure Hospital for more than half a year, and Yuto Murayama knows this. Kurigakure Hospital has been short of manpower recently. After my arm was straightened, because the injury was relatively minor, no medical resources were wasted. Since you are here today, I will leave it to you. Yasuto Murayama has great confidence in Wuxin's strength. Since Wuxin said that the medical ninjutsu training is good, it is likely that the training is good. After Yuto Murayama finished speaking, he walked to the porch in front of the door and sat down, and began to remove the bandages. Wuxin saw that Yuto Murayama had removed the bandages quickly, and whispered. Teacher, just put your hands in front of you. After Wuxin finished speaking, he walked forward and squatted beside Yuto Murayama who was sitting on the porch. He formed seals with his hands, then closed them, slowly emitting green light from his hands, and then pressed them towards Murayama Yuto's arm, using the palm magic to activate and heal Murayama Yuto's arm. The palm magic activates and regenerates local cells. No matter how severe the injury is, as long as the person is not dead, the injury can be restored to its original state in 5 minutes. The green light shone for about 2 minutes. After Wuxin confirmed that the broken bones had healed, he released the ninjutsu and whispered. Take a look, has it recovered? Murayama Yuto cooperated very well, shaking his wrist, then his forearm, and then his entire arm. With smooth movements, there was no discomfort at all, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face, and he said with a smile. Not bad, you have some skills, worthy of being my proud disciple. That's right, don't you see who taught you? Wuxin saw that Murayama Yuto was showing off, and he flattered him very cooperatively. Ha ha ha, but the most important thing is that you are born excellent. It's time to eat. Murayama Yuto was amused by Wuxen's flattery, got up, took off his shoes, and walked into the room. Wuxen hummed lightly, took off his shoes as well, and entered Murayama Yuto's house. In the living room, a little boy was crawling on the ground babbling, and when he saw Murayama Yuto enter the door, he approached Murayama Yuto. Murayama Yuto changed his previous serious and deep appearance, and walked towards the little boy with his teeth and claws bared, but this posture did not scare the little boy, but instead made the little boy laugh. Ha ha ha, it's time to eat. Murayama Yuto picked up the little boy, his face filled with a happy smile. Wuxen saw this warm scene, and smiled unconsciously, and whispered, I have grown up so big without realizing it. By the way, teacher, what is the child's name? Wuxen has always been motivated to improve his strength. When he was a child, he saw teacher Yuto's son several times. At that time, the child was sleeping in the cradle, and he didn't pay much attention to it. Now the child can crawl on the ground, and he looks very cute. Murayama has a heart. As long as you have a heart, everything can change. Murayama Yuto held his son, turned around and smiled and told Wuxen his son's name, and gave Wuxen a meaningful look. Wuxen murmured, Murayama has a heart. Wuxen thought of his parents, who hoped that he would be ruthless, unrighteous, and heartless, so that he could live in the hidden mist village for a long time. But they were, after all, just special Jonins who had just been promoted from Chunin. Although they were a little famous, their strength and energy were limited. Yuto Murayama has been a Jonin in Kurigakure for many years. He cannot survive without some strength at this age, so he named his child. It means that the child can be like their reform team, and with hard work, the village will eventually change. Wuxen is here. I haven't seen you for a while. You have grown taller and will soon become an adult. Come here and wash your hands. Dinner is about to start. Yuto Murayama's wife, Kana Murayama, brought the dishes and placed them on the small coffee table, smiling and greeting Wuxen. Okay, Aunt Kana. Wuxen answered softly and walked to the kitchen to wash his hands as if he was familiar with the place. After lunch, Yuto Murayama's wife, Kanami Murayama, cleaned up the dishes, and then left for lunch with her child, Yushin Murayama, in her arms. Wuxen and Yuto Murayama sat opposite each other in front of the dining table and the coffee table. You are usually hard to find, tell me, what's the matter? Yuto Murayama held a toothpick in his hand, picking his teeth, and spoke frivolously. He knew Wuxen very well, and knew that Wuxen would not come to the temple for no reason. If he came to visit today on his own initiative, it would be a pity that the sun would not rise from the west. Wuxen smiled awkwardly and said, No, teacher, I am here to offer you treasures. During the last mission, when I was interrogating the enemy, I got a very interesting illusion, and I came here to offer it to you. After Wuxen finished speaking, he took out a scroll from his pocket, respectfully placed it on the coffee table, and pushed it forward. Offer treasures, illusions, Yuto Murayama muttered, not quite believing it. However, Murayama Yuto was somewhat interested in the so-called illusion. He reached out and picked up the scroll on the coffee table, opened it and began to read it. Murayama Yuto read the scroll very carefully. This illusion scroll was of a high level and contained a lot of content. After reading for about 10 minutes, Murayama Yuto slowly put the scroll down, his eyes deep, and fell into thought. Wuxen did not disturb him, and sat quietly in front of the coffee table, waiting for Murayama Yuto's opinion on the illusion willow. After a long moment of contemplation, Yuto Murayama's face became more serious. He put away his laziness at home and said, Chakra is released through the long sword, invading the opponent's brain, making the enemy feel that he is bound by the willow branches and unable to move. Then the caster blends into the trajectory of the swaying willow branches, quickly approaches the opponent, and kills the enemy with a sword without anyone noticing. Very exquisite, and very cruel. Release the illusion while cooperating with powerful swordsmanship. Who can survive such an attack? As a senior ninja who is good at illusions, Yuto Murayama can judge that the power of this technique is not inferior to his unique skill, the Mist Illusion Prison. The two techniques have their own characteristics. The Mist Illusion Prison is a group illusion, and enemies in a large area will be affected by the technique, while the illusion willow is a small-scale or single-body immobilization, and then combined with exquisite swordsmanship, it is a must-kill technique. Yuto Murayama realized the difficulty of the tasks that Wuxin had been performing during this period of time, and looked at Wuxin with a complicated look. Wuxin could read the complexity in Murayama Yuto's eyes, which was a kind of care and reluctance, and said, "Teacher, I am a talented ninja famous in the village, and the Mizukichi-sama only uses me according to my ability. As the saying goes, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility, this is normal." Murayama Yuto slowly closed the scroll in his hand and said, "I am very pleased that you have such insights. I like this technique very much, and I accept your kindness." This technique is very helpful for Murayama Yuto's research on illusion. Without being polite to Wuxin, he closed the scroll and put it in his arms. "Teacher, I'm glad you like it." Wuxin smiled. Wuxin had several backups of the scroll of illusion willow to prevent it from being lost or used at other times. Murayama Yuto smiled slightly and did not reply. There was silence for a while, and Yuto Murayama touched his chin and said softly, "Wuxin, if you have anything to say, just say it directly. I am not used to your being so attentive." Yasudo Murayama asked Wuxin about his purpose. "Teacher Yuto, it was not easy to get this technique. Thinking of your teaching of illusion, I think the more research and reserve of illusion, the better. So I came here to present the scroll. Your like is the greatest encouragement to me." Wuxin wanted to ask directly about swordsmanship, but after thinking about it, he was still polite. Yasudo Murayama smiled when he heard this. How could it be possible that the sun rises from the west? He confirmed with Wuxin again. "Don't give me that, kid, is everything okay?" No, really nothing." Wuxin waved his hand to deny it quickly, and then changed the subject and said softly, "However, if there is something wrong, it is this technique. I am not practicing it very smoothly. Wow, although you are very talented, it is better for the teacher to study such a complex technique. After all, the teacher has been immersed in illusion for more than 20 years, and you can't catch up with him in a few steps." When Yuto Murayama heard that it was Wuxin who asked for advice, he immediately put on the teacher's style. After a slight pause, he continued, "This technique not only requires the ability of illusion, but also has some thresholds for fighting and swordsmanship. The shaking of the sword is like the swaying of a willow branch. Do you think it is just the swing of a long sword? If your scroll record is detailed enough and I have not missed anything, I think this technique requires the body to cooperate with the swing of the blade, and finally kill the enemy with one sword through the trajectory of the willow branch. You should know that this technique does not have the step of forming a seal. The swing of the arm and the blade cannot meet the requirements of the technique. Quote, not only the long sword and the arm, but also the body. Right, that's it." Murayama Yuto's words immediately made Wuxin see the light, and his mind suddenly opened up. He was originally not familiar with it, and he didn't understand it. My understanding and application of the illusion willow is still a little superficial. Compared with Murayama Yuto, who has been immersed in illusion for more than 20 years, there is a big gap in vision. Wuxin's previous practice was just imitation and form, and he never got to the point. Murayama Yuto saw that Wuxin was absorbing it quickly like an epiphany, and he couldn't help but think of his own powerlessness when he taught Wuxin ninjutsu in the past. He shook his head and said softly, "It's hard to imagine who developed this technique. The sword technique is mixed with illusion. The person who created this technique must be a famous ninja." Quote. Murayama Yuto's words brought Wuxin back to his senses, and he replied, "Legend has it that most of Konoha's swordsmanship was developed by Konoha's second-generation Hokage, but I don't know if it's true or not." The second-generation Hokage. It seems that's what the legend says. Wuxin, with your talent, it's only a matter of time before you master this technique, so there's no need to be too impatient. Murayama Yuto is very dedicated, and he teaches his only disciple and successor earnestly, both in ninjutsu and mentality. Wuxin nodded, with a posture of being taught, and said softly, "I understand, I'm very interested in this technique, but I'm not very good at swordsmanship." Swordsmanship. Well, that's a problem. In the initial stage of learning, it's better to imitate according to the instructions. As for swordsmanship, it's not a big problem, just study hard. Swordsmanship and physical skills have almost the same functions in combat, and it's not difficult to master them with a physical skill foundation. Moreover, speaking of swordsmanship, my companion Takami Yoshiyuki is a swordsmanship master obsessed with kendo. If you ask him to teach you some swordsmanship, it may be very helpful for you to understand swordsmanship and master this trick of illusion sword. Quote, as a teacher, Murayama Yudo immediately had a plan to deal with his disciple's distress. Takami Yoshiyuki, is he the one who asked me to deliver the ninja sword last time? Hearing Takami Yoshiyuki's name, Wuxin immediately had the impression of the first meeting. He was a man who would make Wuxin's hair stand on end as long as he held the sword. Kurigakure village. In the afternoon, Wuxin and Yudo Murayama walked out of the house and headed for Yoshiyuki Takami's residence. Yudo Murayama's residence is located at number 589 in the East District of the village, and Yoshiyuki Takami's residence is No. 599. They are separated by two small roads. In less than 2 minutes, the two arrived at Yoshiyuki Takami's house. Bang, bang, hey, Yoshiyuki, are you home? Outside the courtyard gate, Yudo Murayama knocked on the door and shouted loudly. The sound of the door opening was heard in the courtyard soon, and then footsteps approached, and the courtyard gate opened. Yoshiyuki Takami, wearing the traditional gray civilian short-sleeved clothing of the water country, glanced at Yudo Murayama and Wuxin outside the door, and chuckled. Why, are you here to avenge the defeat last time? After speaking, he turned and walked into the courtyard. Murayama Yudo strode into the courtyard and replied with a smile. No, I'm not here to play shogi with you this time. The two friends seemed to be in a good mood when they met, and they smiled. Takami Yoshiyuki walked to the eaves of the corridor, took off his shoes, and was surprised when he heard the words, and said, oh, not playing shogi, then what? Fishing, running, or... Wuxin followed Murayama Yudo and interrupted at the right time. Mr. Yoshiyuki, it's hot, Mr. Yudo specially sent you a watermelon. Wuxin followed Murayama Yudo and entered Takami Yoshiyuki's house and put the watermelon on the ground in the corner. Takami Yoshiyuki took Murayama Yudo to the small table in the living room and sat down cross-legged. After hearing Wuxin's words, he looked at Murayama Yudo with a questioning look. Murayama Yudo slowly sat down cross-legged beside the small table and said with a smile. Yixing, my disciple has encountered a little difficulty in his practice and asked me for advice. But you also know my level of swordsmanship in swordsmanship. Takami Yoshiyuki was relieved when he heard this and said softly. Oh, what else is it? Last time your disciple came, he gave me a ninja sword as a gift, and this time he brought fruits, which is pretty good. Takami Yoshiyuki looked at Wuxin with a warm smile on his face, pointed to the table and said, Wuxin, right. Sit down. Yes, Wuxin softly agreed, walked forward and sat cross-legged, and the three of them sat around the small table. On the table, there were teapots and teacups. Gao Johnny poured tea for the two of them. When he handed the tea to Wuxin's table, he said, Wuxin, the prodigy of Kurigakure, a genius ninja. Although I don't go out much, your name is still well known. Murayama Yudo's water escape ninjutsu and illusion are also well known in Kurigakure. If you don't study water escape and illusion well, how can you get involved in kendo? Yixing, you are too kind. Wuxin was still considering how to answer, and Murayama Yudo on the side humbly declined, then turned his eyes to Wuxin and said. Wuxin's talent are rare in the history of Kurigakure. The Mizukage entrusted Wuxin to me to train, and I dare not neglect my responsibility. As for my skills, Wuxin has already mastered them. Just like his reputation, he is a real genius. Wuxin's doubts about swordsmanship are because he encountered difficulties in integrating illusion into swordsmanship practice. You know, my swordsmanship is very ordinary, just enough to deal with some ordinary ninjas. Quote. Takami Yoshiyuki listened to the words, nodded gently, and after a slight silence, he said. I'm asking him, why are you interrupting? Puff, cough cough. The tea that Yudo Murayama had just drunk was sprayed out instantly, but fortunately he reacted quickly, and only some of the tea sprayed out, and he coughed twice. He opened his mouth to speak, turned his head to look at Wuxin, swallowed the dirty words, and said nothing. Takami Yoshiyuki and Yudo Murayama were unrestrained and straightforward. Wuxin could see that they had a deep friendship, and said with a slightly serious face. As teacher Yongren said, I learned a magic that requires swordsmanship, and this magic is very powerful. But I am not good at swordsmanship, so I want to learn about the practice of kendo. Of course, it is not just because of the magic sword. I have always been very interested in swordsmanship since I was a child. It's just that I didn't have the opportunity to get in touch with swordsmanship skills and training. Wuxin didn't hide it and told the truth. When discussing swordsmanship, Takami Yoshiyuki's face became a little more serious. He looked Wuxin up and down and said, although I am a ninja, I have practiced swordsmanship for more than 20 years and have killed countless ninjas with my sword. Since Yudo brought you here, I will never refuse to practice swordsmanship. It's just that practicing swordsmanship is simple. It's very simple. You just need to learn how to chop and move your body. It's similar to how Yudo Murayama uses the sword. However, it's also difficult. If you use the sword well, you don't need those fancy illusions to assist you when you conduct chakra on the sword. Only one sword is needed to kill the enemy. Do you want to learn the easy one or the hard one? Quote. After Gao Jianyisheng finished speaking, he looked at Wuxin quietly, waiting for Wuxin's answer. Easy. Difficult. Quote. Wuxin repeated the sentence and began to think. Murayama Yudo's position in Takami Yoshiyuki's heart is indeed good. He did not refuse Murayama Yudo's visit and request. It's just that the simple and difficult learning methods he proposed made Wuxin not know how to choose for a while. Wuxin is good at many techniques. If he focuses on learning kendo, it will definitely take a long time, which may affect Wuxin's practice in other aspects. Wuxin's requirement for swordsmanship is that the basic skills are solid and can cooperate with him in combat. It's not that he wants to achieve the kind of sword that destroys the world. Wuxin already has a sword that can kill with one sword. Spending a lot of time immersed in kendo will inevitably cause a drag on the practice of medical ninjutsu, illusion, and water escape ninjutsu. After some thought, Wuxin made a decision and said in a deep voice. Mr. Yoshiyuki, I am good at water escape, illusion and medical ninjutsu. Each path requires a lot of energy and time to practice, and I am afraid that it is impossible to practice difficult swordsmanship. My goal is to have a solid foundation in swordsmanship and be able to use it for my own benefit. Wuxin, who had been silent for a long time, slowly stated his choice. Takami Yoshiyuki heard this and nodded slightly expressionlessly, saying, well, you can't chew too much, your choice is wise. Murayama Yudo, who had been silent for a long time, glanced at Yoshiyuki Takami and Wuxin's faces and said softly. Yisheng, I only have this one proud disciple, and my disciple is your disciple. If Wuxin's qualifications are good enough and he can inherit your legacy, then he will pass on your swordsmanship. Why make it so complicated? What's simple and painful? Quote. Murayama Yudo understood Takami Yoshiyuki's words almost immediately, knowing that this guy wanted to pass on his swordsmanship, but there was no outstanding disciple to inherit it. Wuxin was well known, and the name of prodigy and genius had been sung for many years. In addition, Takami Yoshiyuki heard Murayama Yudo say that he had no skills to teach Wuxin, and his learning ability was so strong, obviously a good seedling. Ahem. Takami Yoshiyuki's face was calm, but he coughed slightly abruptly. Murayama Yudo turned to Wuxin and said, the weather is too hot, Wuxin, go cut the watermelon into pieces. Yes. Wuxin understood and got up and walked to the corner. In the afternoon, the sun was shining brightly. In the courtyard of Gao Jianyisheng's house, Wuxin was sweating profusely, holding a long sword in both hands, practicing chopping under the sun. 899, 900, 901. Wuxin shouted out the current number of chopping every time he chopped. The same action, chopped more than 900 times, Wuxin's arms were sore and swollen, as if filled with lead. Although Wuxin's physical skills were solid and he had worked hard on kunai fighting, most of them were dozens of times for each action, and they were enough to be used in combat after being proficient. There has never been a simple action like this, repeated thousands of times. Even though Wuxin knew that practicing physical skills and swordsmanship might be very painful, he didn't expect it to be this way. 937, 938, 939. Wuxin's arms were heavy and even trembling, but he still insisted on repeating the training with full concentration according to Takami Yoshiyuki's instructions. In Takami Yoshiyuki's words, first get familiar with the sword, and then get familiar with the way to use the sword, starting with the simplest chopping. On the eaves of the house next door, Murayama Yuto and Takami Yoshiyuki were eating watermelon and playing shogi leisurely. Takami Yoshiyuki turned his head from time to look at Wuxin's chopping movements, and after observing for a few seconds, he turned back to continue playing chess. Murayama Yuto did not participate in Takami Yoshiyuki's instructions at all. After all, Takami Yoshiyuki was the master of swordsmanship, and Wuxin came to him on his own, so he would not interfere. The watermelon is quite sweet. Takami Yoshiyuki held the watermelon in his left hand and pressed the chess piece with his right hand, pushing it forward. Murayama Yuto looked at Takami Yoshiyuki's moves with his eyes wide open. After carefully reviewing and reasoning about his own chess pieces, he realized that the overall situation was already decided and sighed. Playing chess is so boring, I won't play anymore. As soon as the words fell, smoke suddenly surged in the yard, and a masked figure appeared from the smoke. Anbu. Takami Yoshiyuki and Murayama Yuto noticed the abnormality and looked at the figure in unison. Takami Yoshiyuki. Urgent mission, please go to the Mizukage building immediately. The Anbu who appeared in an instant stated the purpose concisely, and then noticed Murayama Yuto on the side, and the sound of Wuxin chopping while practicing swordsmanship on the side, and spoke again. Very good. Murayama Yuto, Wuxin are here too, urgent mission, please go to the Mizukage building immediately. Yes, X2. Takami Yoshiyuki and Murayama Yuto immediately responded in a deep voice. 998, 999, 1000. After completing 1,000 slashes, Wuxin exhaled heavily and placed the ninja sword in his hand on the ground. Gao, Wuxin was about to report to Takami Yoshiyuki, but just turned around and noticed the Anbu in the field. He couldn't help but feel a little puzzled, and turned his eyes to Murayama Yuto and Takami Yoshiyuki. The two looked serious, and like the Anbu, they seemed to be looking at him, and asked. What's wrong? Is there a mission? The Anbu wore a mask with only 2 holes for the eyes. At this time, the Anbu stared at Wuxin's eyes and seemed to be a little unfriendly, and said in a deep voice. Wuxin, the Mizukage has invited you, please go immediately. Yes. Wuxin heard the words and immediately responded in a deep voice, turning his eyes to Murayama Yuto and Takami Yoshiyuki on the side. The chakra in the yard suddenly surged, and the figures of the Anbu and Wuxin disappeared instantly. Water Shadow Building. After Wuxin and the other two arrived at the Water Shadow Building, they were led to the rooftop of the Water Shadow Building by the Anbu. On the spacious rooftop, nearly 100 people had gathered at this time. All of them were wearing Kurigakur ninja vests, and only Wuxin and the other two were wearing cool civilian shorts. In front of the railings of the rooftop, there was an Anbu standing every few meters. There were more than 20 Anbu alone, and the Anbu were scattered near the railings, in the outer circle of the assembled ninja group. Please wait here. After the Anbu who led Wuxin and the other two finished his instructions, he left in an instant. Wuxin had been in Kurigakur for many years and had never seen a gathering of more than 100 mid-level and upper ninjas. Thinking of the words of the Mizukage Yagura a few days ago, Wuxin roughly understood the purpose of the call. It was not only Wuxin who made judgments. Murayama Yuto and Takami Yoshiyuki beside him also had solemn expressions. As senior ninjas, they were more informed about the situation in the ninja world. Murayama Yuto slowly said. Is the war coming? Yes. Takami Yoshiyuki responded and walked towards the ninja team on the rooftop. Wuxin and Murayama Yuto followed slowly. Murayama Yuto and Takami Yoshiyuki seemed to have good relationships with people. Among the hundreds of ninjas gathered, many people knew them and nodded or raised their hands to greet them. For ninjas who grew up in the Blood Mist era, being able to say hello was already very good. Wuxin Shin and the others didn't wait long on the rooftop. Mizukage Yagura, with 3 Anbu, walked slowly out of the passage and came to the front of the team. Under normal circumstances, more than 100 people should be noisy, but the ninja team on the rooftop was silent and very quiet. After noticing the arrival of Mizukage Yagura, all of them turned to Yagura and waited for the mission. Mizukage Yagura had a serious expression on his face. He walked to the front of the team, about 6 or 7 meters away from the ninja team, glanced at the ninjas in the field, and said loudly. Everyone, such a large-scale gathering, I believe you can all realize that this mission is unusual. Our water country has been silent for a long time since the second generation of Mizukage. Because of the obscurity of the Second Ninja World War, many countries do not take our Kurigakur seriously. Our affiliated forces on the sea, such as the Sea Country and the Rainbow Country, often have Konoha and Kumogakur ninjas appearing to snatch the things that originally belonged to them. The mission entrusted by our village. We took a boat to the Land of Fire, and the merchants of the Land of Wind were often ambushed and destroyed by Konoha and Sand Village ninjas. As a Mizukage, I dare not forget these deep hatreds for a moment. Now, the third generation Kazekage of the Land of Wind has disappeared, and the Land of Wind has sent troops to the Land of Fire to ask for punishment, and the war between the two countries has begun. With such a good opportunity, it is time for us to end it all. Quote. The words of the Mizukage Yagura attracted the ninjas present, who looked at each other, but no one spoke, and waited for orders quietly. Yakura did not care about the silence of the ninjas. After the atmosphere was exaggerated, he said in a deep voice. Zigwashin Puffer Ghost, He Chue Le Ya, Biwajuzo, take off your masks. Yes, the three Anbu behind Yagura responded loudly and took off the masks on their faces. Everyone, revenge is now. Gather your own genin deployments and meet at the village gate at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. This operation is called the Wave, and the commander of the operation is Zigwashin Puffer Ghost, and the deputy commanders are Kurochu Raiga and Biwajuzo. Tomorrow morning, set off by boat to conquer fire wind and let the ninja world feel the waves of the sea. Disperse. Yakura briefly explained the purpose of the operation, and shouted an action order to disperse, waving his hand. Swish, swish, swish. The rooftop where more than 100 ninjas originally disappeared in an instant with a sharp sound of breaking through the air, leaving only the smoke and dust. There are so many mid-jo ninjas, plus their subordinates, the scale of the personnel this time is probably thousands of people. Wuxin, who left instantly behind Murayama Yuto and Takami Yoshiyuki, felt a little heavy in his heart for the sudden war. On the sea, more than 100 warships were sailing. At the bow of the most luxurious and tall ship in the front, Wuxin was wearing a ninja vest, a mask, and carrying a ninja sword. He and a ninja in the same outfit stood behind Zigwashin Puffer Ghost, the commander-in-chief of the Sea Wave operation. Zigwashin Puffer Ghost looked at the sea, his sharp teeth exposed, showing a cruel smile, and said, There is still an hour to arrive at the southern port of the Wind Country. Wu, Shark, your chance to make achievements has come. Wu is Wuxin's code name. Wuxin, who stood behind Zigwashin Puffer Ghost, was not even as tall as Zigwashin Puffer Ghost's chest. Wuxin was promoted to a special Jonin. His original teammates Shuilian and Yamagami Kazi belonged to the Jonin Murayama Yudo team. In this major operation, the Mizukage did not temporarily arrange subordinates for Wuxin. Wuxin, who was originally a sharp sword of the Mizukage and did a job similar to that of the Anbu, was directly assigned to the Anbu by the commander-in-chief Zigwashin Puffer Ghost during the operation. His teammate was the Anbu master codenamed Shark, who was only slightly smaller than Zigwashin Puffer Ghost. Wuxin, who had just taken up the post not long ago, was not very familiar with Zigwashin Puffer Ghost. Although they had met several times before, it had been a long time since they last met. He did not respond to Zigwashin Puffer Ghost's words and honestly stood guard as a guard. The burly Anbu Shark on the side said, Whether you will achieve great things or be buried in a foreign land, we will never know until the end of the war. The depressed mentality is in sharp contrast to the high-spirited Watermelon Mountain Puffer Ghost. The Watermelon Mountain Puffer Ghost turned his head and looked at the Anbu Shark, sneering. Shark, your mentality will make newcomers misunderstand you as a rookie. If I were not your captain and had seen your cruel methods, I would probably think so too. Captain, cruelty is always unavoidable during the mission. The man codenamed Shark has a unique voice, and although he is a subordinate of the Watermelon Mountain Puffer Ghost, the relationship between the two seems to be very harmonious, which is obviously different from other teams and departments with clear class distinctions. The Watermelon Mountain Puffer Ghost turned to look at Wuxin and chuckled. Wuxin, what do you think of the shark? Instead of building a career, it is better to prevent the tragedy of burying bones in a foreign land. Wuxin pondered for a while, followed the topic, and gave a conventional answer. Prevent the tragedy of being buried in a foreign land. As a ninja, this is only a matter of time. How to prevent it? Your mentality may make such things happen faster. Only by not being afraid of being buried in a foreign land and being cautious at all times can such things come a little later. Fear is useless and will make nightmares come true. What we need to do is to make the enemy afraid and fearful. Let the enemy's nightmare come true and let the enemy's day come sooner. Zigwashan Puffer Ghost said a lot, and there was a sense of teaching. After a slight pause, he continued. Wu, the last time you fought Shuifengmaru, it was not like this. I summoned you to the Anbu for great use. I hope you won't let me down. Wu Xin was very surprised. He didn't know what Zigwashan Puffer Ghost meant by great use. After a slight silence, he said in a deep voice. I will work hard, Master Puffer Ghost. Hey, Zigwashan Puffer Ghost chuckled, turned his head and looked forward. The coastline ahead is already visible to the naked eye. Even if the ninjas jump off the boat and use chakra to run on the water, they can reach this distance. The boat sailed slowly, and when it was about 100 meters away from the beach, it dropped anchor and fixed it. On more than 100 warships, hundreds of ninjas jumped off the boats, walked on the water, and rushed to the beach. The vanguard troops this time were led by 3 ninja swords and equipped with more than 100 ships. There were nearly 200 middle and senior ninjas, plus the junior ninjas of these middle and senior ninjas, as well as auxiliary troops such as the signal squad and the communication squad, and the elite of the Anbu directly under the Zigwashan Puffer Demon, with a total number of thousands. There were more than 1,000 people, and Wuxin looked at the densely packed mist ninjas rushing to the shore, looking for the figures of his teachers, Murayama Yuto and Takami Yoshiyuki. There were not many senior ninjas in the operation, most of them assisted the 3 commanders and were in charge of the ninja troops. Several boats near Zigwashan Puffer Ghost were filled with Anbu ninjas, who were directly under the jurisdiction of Zigwashan Puffer Ghost and were his main force. Standing on the bow of the boat, Zigwashan Puffer Ghost, like Wuxin, looked at the ninja troops running ashore and whispered. The wind country is full of deserts and extremely poor. Such an environment is not conducive to our water escape. Sha, Wu, tell me, why did the Mizukage order us to attack the wind country instead of the fire country, which is not far away and extremely rich? Anbu Shark responded softly. Lord Mizukage naturally has his concerns. I am just an Anbu who can only kill people, how can I understand these things? Quote. Wuxin could probably guess some of the Mizukage's thoughts and replied. The sudden disappearance of the Sand Village's 3rd case cage will inevitably cause a fight for the position of case cage, and their village management will fall into chaos. Before the 3rd case cage is found, such chaos may continue for a long time. The Mizukage probably meant to take his life while he is sick. Quote. You know a lot. Zigwashan Puffer Ghost nodded, agreeing with Wuxin's words, and after a slight pause, he continued. Wu, as my direct unit, you only need to supervise the battle and sit in the rear, and you should be safer than other teams. However, if there are any tough opponents among the enemies, or a team needs support, then our strength will be needed. Now the ninja troops of the wind country are fighting with the fire country in the east, and the country is empty. If we can break into the sand village and plunder the ninjutsu and treasures in the sand village, then this trip will be worthwhile. Wuxin remained silent and did not answer. As for Zigwashan Puffer Ghost's previous words, Wuxin could understand that he was seeking credit and showing his special care for him. Anbu Shark on the side said softly with some disappointment. Master Puffer Ghost, it may be difficult for 1,000 people to break into the sand village. The defense fortress of the sand village is well known. In the Ninja World War, countless ninjas shed blood in front of the sand village. Quote. Wuxin glanced at Shark and thought that his mentality was indeed very cautious, but he didn't know if he realized that his words had disturbed the morale of the army. Zigwashan Puffer Ghost turned around and stared at the Anbu Shark. The corners of his mouth slowly raised, revealing a cruel smile, his eyes were fierce, and he said coldly. Shark, don't be so pessimistic. When the time comes, I will let you attack the first line of sky. After all, you are my right-hand man in the Anbu, and I believe that you will be able to complete this mission properly for me. Right, quote. The words of the Puffer Ghost made Shark realize that his words were somewhat inappropriate. He was stunned for a while and whispered. As long as it is your order, I will not retreat. After Wuxin realized that his situation was safe, he wandered in the sky and thought about the sword drawing technique taught by Gao Jianyishing these days. After sailing on the sea for more than 20 days, Wuxin spent most of his time on Gao Jianisheng's ship except for the task of guarding the puffer ghost of Zigua Mountain, and practiced all the way. Takamaki Yisheng's swordsmanship teaching was from the shallow to the deep, and Wuxin mastered and learned quickly. After practicing the basic swordsmanship, he began to practice the specific attack technique of sword drawing. On the southern sea of the Kingdom of Wind, hundreds of ships were docked in a row. From time to time, ninjas jumped off the ships and walked on the water to land. On land, ninja teams also returned to the ships to repair from time to time. At the end of the deck of the most luxurious and huge warship in front, Wuxin's upper body was slightly bent and crouched, his right hand was on the handle of the ninja sword on his back, and he was concentrating and holding his breath and looking at the wooden target about 2 meters away in front of him. Clang! The crisp sound of drawing the sword sounded, and Wuxin's figure had appeared behind the wooden stake, and the drawn long sword was slowly retracted into the scabbard on his back. Sword drawing technique. The samurai's long sword is generally hung on the left waist, and the mark of drawing the sword is from the lower left to the upper right. After Wuxin became proficient in the samurai sword drawing technique, he practiced the second sword drawing technique taught by Takami Yoshiyuki, with the upper body bent and crouched, drawing the sword from the back, and the mark of slashing is from the upper right to the lower left. Sword Wuxin has already performed well, but the second type of sword drawing has not been tested by Gao Jianisheng. Before, Gao Jianisheng often used wooden swords to fight with Wuxin during teaching to test the results. But now that the war has broken out, Gao Jianisheng's team followed Biwa Juzo and raided the Wind Country. There has been no news for more than a week. Thump! Behind Wuxin, a dull sound of kunai hitting the wooden target sounded. The Anbu codenamed Shark slowly put away his throwing posture and walked slowly to the wooden target to check how many rings his throwing hit. Wuxin, who heard the sound, turned around and looked at Shark's face. During the break, Shark's mask was put on his head, revealing his face. The skin on his face was blue, just like his body. His teeth looked like the watermelon mountain puffer demon, triangular and sharp, and there were gill-like patterns on his cheekbones. His appearance was very consistent with his codename, like a land shark. Hey, Shark, are you the so-called Kisame Hoshigaki, the weirdo from Mist Village? After spending these days together, Wuxin and Shark have become familiar with each other. Wuxin can't remember how many times he has asked this question. Kisame Hoshigaki, the weirdo from Mist Village, Zabuza Momochi, the demon from Mist Village, and the genius Wuxin are all well-known geniuses in Mist Village. Shark heard Wuxin's words, turned his head and looked at Wuxin, but did not answer. He retracted his gaze and took the kunai off the wooden target. After taking off the kunai, he slowly walked back to the previous throwing position and continued to play kunai throwing. What a weirdo, this look, he should be Kisame Hoshigaki. Wuxin muttered, and seeing that Shark ignored him, he lost the desire to communicate with him again. Wuxin is very interested in exploring Shark's identity, but his temper is indeed a bit weird. He talks a lot when facing the watermelon mountain puffer ghost, but he is cold and silent at other times. Wuxin, who had been rejected by Hoshigaki Kisame, lost the desire to practice swordsmanship. He walked to the railing of the deck and looked at the Kurigakur ninjas shuttling back and forth from land and sea. This scene made Wuxin feel a little emotional, and he whispered, "It's good to have a backer. Others are fighting in the desert, and we are nominally in charge of the rear, but in fact, Wuxin has been in charge of this position for more than a week with Ziguashan Puffer Ghost. He has seen the pity of the wounded, and of course, the rich supplies looted. Thousands of ninjas raided the defenseless Wind Country. The supplies brought back by these Kurigakur ninjas can be said to be stained with the blood of the people of the Wind Country." Actually, what? Do you mean to say that they are actually avoiding war and living in peace? The shark-faced Anbu suddenly replied and walked slowly to Wuxin's side. "Huh, your throat is open. I thought you would only open your throat when Lord Ziguashan Puffer Ghost issued an order. It's really strange." Wuxin did not answer Shark's words, but half-joked and skipped the topic. After all, Wuxin has lived 2 lives, and he can fully understand Ziguashan Puffer Ghost's style. Ziguashan Puffer Ghost's mind is probably that if the assault troops have brilliant results and are unstoppable, he will definitely rush to the front line immediately to gain merit. If the front line encounters setbacks and difficulties, he will stay in the rear and provide timely assistance to win people's hearts. And if the front line is defeated and returns in defeat, he may just retreat with the Anbu to protect himself. The Anbu shark ignored Wuxen's teasing, looked at the mist ninja teams returning from the shore, and said in a deep voice. There are quite a lot of teams returning these 2 days, and most of them are injured. Today's situation is more serious than yesterday. Wuxen has been focusing on swordsmanship training for a while, and didn't pay much attention to these. He let out a light, and observed carefully. Dang, dang, dang. The gong of the assembly sounded. Wuxen and Shark raised their hands to take off the masks on their heads, covering their faces, and Flash jumped up and rushed to the assembly position at the bow. Swish, swish, swish. The two of them moved in an instant and quickly arrived at the bow. At the same time, the Anbu from all directions were gathering here. At the bow, Zigwashan Puffer Ghost was carrying a large sword wrapped in bandages and as big as a door panel, facing the Anbu ninjas who had gathered on the hull. In the short time since the gong sounded, nearly 50 ninjas had gathered here. Seeing that the people were almost all there, Zigwashan Puffer Ghost said in a deep voice. Everyone, we are in a little trouble. In the south of the Wind Country, a tricky female ninja named Yi Kang appeared. We already have more than 30 teams, and they were destroyed in her hands. Yi Kang was regarded as a hero by the Sand Village by killing our mist ninjas. What a shame. Everyone, our duty is to deal with these difficult enemies. Now, it's our turn to take action. Zigwashan Puffer Ghost serves as the Anbu. The captain has been in this position for many years and has a strong leadership temperament. He finished the story in a few words and stirred up the atmosphere. After a slight pause, he continued loudly. First and second teams, go out to search for Yi Kang and get rid of her. Third and fourth teams strengthen their vigilance and wait for orders. I heard that Yi Kang is a very beautiful woman. Go, my elites, catch her and bring her back to me. The Watermelon Mountain Puffer Ghost said at the end, revealing a cruel and lewd smile. Yes, X-34. A group of Anbu responded loudly, and with the sound of breaking air, the bow deck, which was originally full of people, suddenly became loose. Wuxen and Shark, a group of 2, jumped off the deck and rushed to the shore. The 2 belonged to the first team of the Anbu, which was the team where the Watermelon Mountain Puffer Ghost's confidants and elites were. Wuxen's joining was a deliberate move by the Watermelon Mountain Puffer Ghost to win him over. This time, Zigwashan Pufferfish Demon sent out his elite subordinates. It seems that he is not joking. He really wants to deal with Yi Kang, the rising star of Sand Village. In a few seconds, Wuxen and Shark rushed onto the beach from the sea and headed straight north. Night. A small tent was built between 2 strange rocks in the desert plain. In the tent, 2 figures, one tall and one thin, sat opposite each other. Wuxen closed his eyes and stood upright in front of him with his hands in the seal of the future. After about 10 seconds, Wuxen opened his eyes, put his hands down, and said in a deep voice. It is safe within 1 kilometer, and there is no trace of other people. This place is not suitable for the performance of water escape ninjutsu, and we must investigate carefully. Shaw's face was very solemn. In a dangerous environment, all the words he spoke were cautious and careful. I know my limits, Wuxen replied coldly. During the day, they set out from the headquarters to search for the Sand Village hero Yi Kang, and encountered several Sand Village teams along the way, which caused a lot of trouble for both Wuxen and Shaw. It was not that the strength of these Sand Village ninjas was very strong that made Wuxen feel pressured, but their attitude of seeing death as home made Wuxen a little solemn, and Shaw beside him was also more careful because of this. By the way, I always feel something is wrong. Since Wuxen camped here, he has been feeling a little uneasy, and his perception technique didn't find anything unusual. Shaw heard Wuxen's words and said solemnly, Do you feel the same way? It seems that we are all sensitive to danger. I think we should contact and meet up with other teams. Well, I'll sense it again. After a moment of hesitation, Wuxen decided to check the surrounding environment again, clasped his hands together, and closed his eyes. Ninjutsu. Perception. Wuxen's chakra turned into an invisible membrane and spread out in all directions. 100 meters, 200 meters, 500 meters, 1000 meters. In the perception range, except for some small animals such as lizards, scorpions, mosquitoes, there are no human models. Wuxen, who should be relieved by this, still feels uneasy. Chakra gathered, and the scattered chakra spread in a direction to the north to increase the single direction perception range. 5, 6. No, 10. To the north, at the end of Wuxen's perception technique, a figure suddenly appeared. At first, there were 5 people, and people kept entering Wuxen's perception range, and finally there were 10 people. Anbu Shark heard Wuxen's words and said in a deep voice. 10 people. It seems that we are facing a fierce battle. Wuxen closed his eyes tightly, frowned slightly, and detected the people who entered his perception range without answering. Shark looked at Wuxen quietly, waiting for Wuxen's investigation results, only to see Wuxen's brows getting tighter and tighter, and finally formed a Chuan character. More than 10. The people in front, the chakra is scattered, and they are performing the instant body technique from time to time. 2 fell to the ground. No, they are being hunted down. Wuxen opened his eyes suddenly and realized the sudden situation. The number of people in the perception range has increased from 10 people detected at the beginning to more than 30 people now, and people are still entering his perception range continuously. Ding, ding, boom, rumble. The distance of nearly 2 kilometers is not far for ninjas. As soon as Wuxen finished speaking, the roar of explosions in the distance could reach his ears. Sha realized the seriousness of the matter and said in a deep voice. Lie. Yes. Swish, swish. The 2 figures in the tent disappeared without a trace, leaving only the tent curtain shaking in the wind. In the desert, 7 or 8 Kurigakure ninjas were chased by dozens of Sandagakure ninjas. The Kurigakure ninjas fought and retreated, releasing poisonous smoke and detonating talismans behind them from time to time. These Kurigakure ninjas were not at all chaotic, their movements were steady, they tried their best to fight back and create opportunities to escape. Dozens of Sandagakure ninjas wearing tan vests and white headscarves in the back kept firing wind escape ninjutsu and kunai. From time to time, people in the Kurigakure ninja team fell behind and were hacked to pieces. Kill these dogs of Kurigakure. Don't kill him. Leave him to me to torture. You should have expected this day when you invaded the desert. You actually destroyed the oasis, your crime is extremely heinous. You will be torn into pieces. The Sunagakure ninja team roared and cursed from time to time, and they seemed very angry and chased them all the way. On the wasteland, there were only some strange rocks standing, and they were scattered widely, with almost no shelter. On the yellow-brown land about 100 meters away, Wuxen and Shark were lying on the ground, wearing a cloth of the same color as the land. The night was dark, and the 2 people were also very good at hiding. The passing Kurigakure and Sunagakure did not notice them. After a while, the 2 teams fought and marched, gradually going away. The lurking Wuxen and Shark breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. The 2 people from the Hidden Mist village were not at all uncomfortable with this situation, because if they stepped forward to help, it would not be of much help, and would only make the team being hunted more anxious. Woo, just 2 more people. Wuxen whispered to Shark beside him. If they continue to chase us, they will encounter the large force behind us. We ambush here, maybe we can attack them from the front and back. Shaq's voice echoed from the land beside him. Your suggestion is good, but our mission is to search for Yi. Hey, Wu, look at the person in front, does he look like the target of the mission? In the desert at night, ninjas wearing tan vests and white headscarves occasionally passed by and joined the chasing team. While Wuxen and the other person were whispering, a female ninja who was dressed a little differently from the ordinary sand ninja suddenly appeared. She was wearing an off-shoulder outfit and a bun on her head. She was a short distance away and her face was not very clear. The female ninja was alone, and her running speed was not fast. She stopped from time to time, looked around, and then ran again, heading towards the direction of the previous sand ninja team. Wuxen looked at it carefully for a few times and whispered. Yes, it's the mission target. After Wuxen finished speaking, he slightly lifted a corner of the yellow cloth wrapped around him and looked at the lurking shark. Shaq also lifted a corner of the yellow cloth and looked at Wuxen. The 2 of them made eye contact and nodded slightly. Swish, swish, swish. Before the 2 of them started to move, the sound of a sharp blade breaking through the air came. Wuxen and Shark reacted quickly, jumped up and dodged the attack of the kunai. As the hidden yellow cloth fell to the ground, the attackers also saw the faces of Wuxen and the others, as well as the vests that were very different in color from the clothes of the sand village. Cover! Wuxen shouted softly, jumped back, and fell behind Shark, closed his eyes, and clasped his hands together to form the seal of the unknown. Sense. Wuxin was very cautious. Before ambushing, he looked at the situation nearby to avoid being surrounded by dumplings. The female ninja was beautiful, with green hair, and bright orange bangs on both sides. She was calm and stood about 5 or 6 meters away from Shark and Wuxin. Shark wore a mask on his head, and his face showed a touch of cruelty. He slowly pulled out the long sword on his back and said coldly, "You can actually find us. You are worthy of being the hero of Sand Village, Yi Kang. Woo, we're lucky." The target actually fell into the trap. Wuxin opened his eyes after the perception ended and said solemnly, "A 4-person team is about 800 meters to the north. Judging from their direction of travel, they will pass by here. Which side do you choose?" Sha held the ninja sword in both hands and asked Wuxin in a hoarse voice. Shark's arrogance was rare. Wuxin hesitated for a moment and asked, "Which side do you choose?" Yi Kang's face was calm. Seeing that Wuxin and Shark did not run away from him but wanted to kill him, the corners of his mouth could not help but curl up slightly, and he said coldly, "No need to choose, there is only one ending for you, and that is, death." Yi Kang's face was calm. Seeing that Wuxin and Shark wanted to kill him instead of running away, the corners of his mouth could not help but curl up slightly, and he said coldly, "No need to choose, there is only one ending for you, that is, death." After she finished speaking, she stretched out her right palm, and a bright fireball emerged in front of her palm, illuminating the surrounding area. The fireball was as big as a lead ball. As soon as it appeared, the temperature nearby seemed to rise by 2 degrees in an instant. Shark saw this scene, his face was still calm, and he said softly, "Since you have confidence, Yi Kang will be left to you. I'll go over there." After Shark finished speaking, he turned around and rushed to the north. Wuxin glanced at the direction where his companion Shark left, confirmed that he was going north, and after fighting the passing sand ninja, he quickly turned his gaze back and stared at Yi Kang, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Want to run? Shark wanted to leave, but Yi Kang didn't want to let him go. He controlled the fireball with his right hand, bent his knees slightly and jumped into the air, and the fireball on his right palm blasted towards Shark. Scorch escape. Steam attack. Shark had rich mission experience. When he realized the danger, he turned around quickly and formed seals with both hands quickly. When the hot fireball blasted towards him, he opened his mouth and a stream of water spurted out. Water escape. Mizusume bullet. Boom. Wu Xin didn't make a move just now. Seeing that Shark could use such a strong water escape in such a hot and dry environment, he confirmed that he was the Hoshigaki Kisame. The Mizusume bullet was 7 or 8 meters long, and Yi Kang's fireball was the same size as a lead shot. The two sides were not in the same order of magnitude at all. However, after the collision of water and fire, the small fireball hit the Mizusume bullet, and the Mizusume bullet quickly vaporized and disappeared. The completely different physiques of the scorching-style fireball and Kisami's water shark bullet were destroyed together, leaving only the water vapor rising suddenly in the desert, proving the ninjutsu battle just now. Good opportunity. Seeing the strong water vapor, Wuxin immediately formed seals with both hands, and used his chakra to attract the water vapor. At the same time, he used his own chakra to amplify it, and shouted, "Ninjutsu. Mist hidden technique." In the dry and hot desert edge environment, a cloud of fog suddenly emerged, covering a range of nearly 100 meters. Kisame saw that Wuxin had already taken action in the back, and rushed to the north according to the agreed tactics to block the sand-hidden ninja team. In the mist, Wuxin created 3 water clones, which were distributed in the southeast, northwest and northeast directions with the main body, and said coldly, "Sand Village hero Yi Kang, it's a pity that you met me. Throat, cervical vertebrae, lungs, liver, carotid artery, subclavian artery, kidneys, heart, 8 vital points. He, hero, where do you want me to attack?" Wuxin's words came from all directions, exerting psychological pressure on Yi Kang, who was in the mist and deprived of vision. At the same time, Wuxin's chakra continued to dissipate and mix into the mist, increasing the density of the mist and applying the mist perception technique. Ninjutsu is good, but it has no effect under my burning escape. Yi Kang's words rang out in the thick fog, and at the same time, a faint sizzling sound came out. Wuxin, with his left hand in the seal of the future, felt that the temperature of the mist seemed to continue to rise, and was a little suspicious. Hiss. The temperature of the mist soon became so hot that Wuxin couldn't stand it, and he jumped out of the mist with a hissing sound. The water vapor in the mist seemed to be boiling, rising into the air continuously. The originally thick mist gradually thinned, revealing Yi Kang's looming figure. The mist dissipated, and Yi Kang opened his hands to the left and right. In the palms of each hand, there was a dazzling fireball. Scorch escape. Wu Xin looked at the fireballs in Yi Kang's hands, and a strong fear emerged in his eyes. Then 2 small fireballs could actually evaporate the water mist within 100 meters. The power contained in them was simply beyond imagination. Wu Xin immediately took out a sealed scroll from the tactical pocket on the chest of the ninja vest, quickly opened the scroll, and took out the jade bottle sealed in it. It's really hard for me to turn such a handsome guy into a mummy. Yi Kang completely ignored Wu Xin's actions, spoke charmingly, and at the same time, her hands opened to the left and right slowly closed in front of her. Along with Yi Kang's actions, the fireballs in her left and right palms also slowly merged. After the 2 fireballs merged, they shone brightly like a little sun, and the temperature in the field suddenly soared. Wuxin was sweating profusely, but he didn't dare to reach out to wipe it off. He pulled off the bottle seal and pointed it at Yi Kang. Yi Kang's face looked somewhat sacred under the light, and he said softly, "Under this ninjutsu, there are only 2 ways, being burned to ashes or being steamed into a mummy. Little guy, if you want to blame someone, blame your village for sending you here." Yi Kang originally looked reluctant, but when he finished speaking, his expression suddenly turned ferocious, as if he had a deep hatred for the Kurigakur ninja. After Yi Kang finished speaking, he bent his knees slightly, jumped into the air, held a radiant fireball in his hands, swung his arms, and threw the fireball heavily at Wuxin. Scorch release. Oversteaming kill. When the fireball was still in Yi Kang's hand, Wuxin felt uncomfortable all over, as if he was being scorched by the sun. When Yi Kang jumped up and launched the ninjutsu, Wuxin adjusted the direction of the bottle, aimed at his feet, and shouted, "Jade purification bottle, release." Boom. Suddenly, the sound of waves hitting the shore came from the barren and dry desert. The small bottle mouth in Wuxin's hand seemed like a seawater eye. The majestic and turbulent sea water erupted and soon formed a big wave. After the first layer of big waves appeared, the water level quickly rose to the second layer of big waves, and then the third layer, and the fourth layer. The originally hot environment quickly became cool. Wuxin stood on the waves, and his figure also rose continuously with the waves. Yi Kang's dazzling fireball hit the waves, causing a violent explosion. The cool water vapor environment was suddenly filled with hot and boiling water vapor, which quickly spread nearly 100 meters. As this burning escape, a watermelon-sized fireball actually caused such a reaction. Wuxin was shocked beyond words. At the same time, the diffused water vapor made Wuxin lose his vision. Wuxin, who had seen Yi Kang's strength, did not dare to be careless at all. He held the bottle mouth downward and continued to burst out water. The water flowed continuously, and flood disasters surged on the flat ground. The barren and water-deficient wasteland of the Wind Kingdom welcomed its favorite water. However, the amount of water was too large, and the water flow was raging and spreading in all directions. The wasteland seemed to be submerged by water and turned into a lake. As the water flow spread, the steaming water vapor gradually disappeared. Wuxin, who had regained his vision, looked around and saw that the surrounding environment had changed drastically and became the most suitable environment for water escape ninjas to fight. Yi Kang stood on the waves, and under the impact of the waves, he shook a few times. His face was no longer as cold and calm as before, and his posture was a little helpless. As the steam dissipated, the 2 people who regained their vision together had a reversal of mentality. Wu Xin saw Yi Kang's embarrassed state, and from the initial uneasiness, he became calm and laughed. "Ha ha 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 ha, I thought the burning escape was so powerful, it seems that it is just so-so. Yi Kang, if you have any other tricks, use them. Otherwise, there will be no chance." Wu Xin sealed the mouth of the jade bottle, stuffed it into the vest from the collar, and simply stored it to avoid losing it. "This environment is not good for me." Yi Kang stood on the waves, and quickly judged the situation in his heart. He looked at Wu Xin deeply, jumped back, and turned around to run away. This environment is not good for me. Yi Kang stood on the water waves, quickly judged the situation in his heart, looked at Wu Xin deeply, jumped back, and turned around to run away. Want to leave? I'm afraid it's not that easy. Face to face Yi Kang's defeat, Wu Xin stood there calmly, with only one seal with his hands. Ninjutsu. Mist hidden technique. Mist quickly spread over the lake, stretching for hundreds and thousands of meters. Yi Kang was blocked by the mist after running for a while, and lost his vision. The visibility was only about 10 meters. In the mist, Wuxin's voice came from all directions. You can't escape. Facing the crisis, Yi Kang turned his head and looked around, and quickly adjusted his mentality, and said in a deep voice. You are not an unknown person in the hidden mist village, tell me your name. Wuxin's voice sounded from all directions, vague and uncertain. Throat, cervical vertebrae, lungs, liver, carotid artery, subclavian artery, kidney, heart. He, 8 vital points, guess where I will attack. Wuxin didn't answer Yagura's words at all. The old tricks of the hidden mist assassination technique put pressure on Yi Kang. Yi Kang's visible range was extremely low. Seeing that he couldn't find Wuxin's trace, he quickly formed seals with both hands. Wind escape. Big breakthrough. Yi Kang pouted his mouth and blew out a violent wind escape airflow. The fog in the direction of the airflow was blown away, and the environment became clear. The visibility changed from about 10 meters to more than 100 meters. The increased visible range did not give Yi Kang confidence, because from a distance, the ground was still wet, and the fog was still far away. Clang. In the fog, the sound of drawing a sword suddenly rang out. Yi Kang's face was dull, and a red line appeared diagonally from her shoulder to her waist. Behind her, Wu Xin slowly put the knife into the scabbard on her back, and said softly. It's over. Wu Xin, who had just put away the knife, frowned, and his body turned into a pool of clear water, scattered in the lake on the ground. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the sky, dozens of kunai shot from top to bottom at the position where Wu Xin had just stood, but Wu Xin evacuated first, and the kunai only shot into the water, causing some small splashes. Yi Kang, who fell from the sky, looked around and tried to find Wu Xin's figure. It's useless. Do you know the cat playing with the mouse? The mouse's fate is already determined. In the mist, Wuxin's voice came from all directions. The mentality of both parties has reversed from the first meeting. Now Wuxin is leisurely playing with Yi Kang. The reason why Wuxin plays with Yi Kang is because she didn't put her mind. Although Wuxin has killed countless people, he can't do such a thing as catching Yi Kang alive and tying him up to the Ziguashan puffer demon with his remaining conscience. Wuxin, who was hidden in the mist, noticed something wrong. A large number of ninjas from the south were coming here quickly. They were the group of Sand Village ninjas recorded in Wuxin's perception technique before. In the north, the chakra familiar to Kisame was moving quickly. Hundreds of ninjas followed him. It was obviously impossible for Kisame to come from the north. Kisame was also in a dilemma of being hunted and besieged. Wuxin's fog sensing technique has a very large sensing range. In a sense, as long as the fog covers a large enough area, Wuxin's sensing range is far enough. If it is fog in a natural environment, it can even detect dozens of kilometers in radius. Wuxin, who noticed the people coming from both sides, put away his idleness of playing cat and mouse, and quickly approached Yi Kang in the fog. 20 meters away from her field of vision, he quickly formed seals with both hands. The originally calm lake surface suddenly began to flow, surging with countless small waves. Wuxin's ninjutsu took shape very quickly. He put his hands together and shouted. Water escape. Water tornado. Under Wuxin's feet, the water flow swirled around Wuxin and rose. The fluctuation of the water flow aroused Yi Kang's vigilance. Yi Kang held the kunai in both hands in a defensive posture, looking left and right and turning from time to time. When the water surface fluctuated more and more, Yi Kang also heard Wuxin's voice behind him. As soon as Yi Kang turned around, he saw a 5 or 6 meter high wave coming. Yi Kang reacted quickly, dropped his kunai, and jumped back to avoid it. But when he dodged and jumped back, Yi Kang saw a more terrifying scene. Behind this 5 or 6 meter wave, there was another 10 meter wave. Behind the huge wave, there was an even more spectacular water tornado rising continuously. Yi Kang quickly formed seals with both hands, and when the huge wave came, he finally formed a ninjutsu with both hands. Wind style. Hurricane tornado. Yi Kang blew out a strong wind, and after the strong wind formed, it rushed straight into the huge wave in a rotating manner. The huge wave had substance and weight. Although Yi Kang's wind style was fierce, it only moved the middle part of the huge wave. A large hole was blown open, and the waves on both sides hit her with unabated momentum. At the same time, the rising water tornado bent down and smashed towards Yi Kang. Yi Kang couldn't even resist the second huge wave, was swallowed by the waves, and hit under the water. Yi Kang, who was a little dizzy after being hit by the huge waves, struggled to swim underwater, trying to get rid of the dilemma of being caught by the water. However, her struggle was doomed to be in vain, and a more violent water vortex rushed towards her from above. The water flow rushed into the water from top to bottom, and the power of rotation caused a large vortex, which continuously generated waves and spread to all directions. After being hit by the water tornado, Yi Kang lost consciousness directly and was caught by the vortex and sank to the bottom of the water. Wu Xin, who controlled the water escape, saw that Yi Kang had been dealt with, and performed the fog perception technique to observe the situation within his perception range. Why is Kisame here? In the mist, Kisame was about 100 meters away from him, and rushed towards him at a very fast speed. At the northern edge of the mist, there were thousands of ninjas standing. More than 1,000 ninjas stood outside the mist, seemingly waiting for some orders. Hey, Kisame, I'm here. Wuxin, who sensed Kisame, saw Kisame passing by him about 20 meters away, so he shouted loudly. The visible range in the mist was only about 10 meters. Kisame heard Wuxin's voice and immediately rushed in the direction of the voice. Kisame ran for only 2 steps and saw Wuxin standing on the water, shouting. Wuxin, you are not dead yet. It seems that I worried for nothing. Kisame, what do you mean? Do you think I am not Yi Kang's opponent? Wuxin was a little puzzled. This guy seemed to lack some knowledge of Wuxin's strength. Kisame hurriedly explained. No, Yi Kang killed many Jonins in our village and defeated more than 30 teams. I thought we were unlucky to run into her, but I didn't expect you to be able to kill her. I admire you. Hurry up, Kisame, the Sand Village ninjas are rushing in, there are thousands of them. Wuxin, who had been paying attention to the edge of the fog, noticed that the large Sand Village army broke into the fog. The difference in the number of people on both sides was too big. Wuxin had no idea of fighting 1 against 1,000. He said hello and left quickly. After a moment of hesitation, Kisame followed Wuxin and whispered. Wu, call the code name during the mission. Okay, Kisame. Kashigaki Kisame was puzzled that Wuxin could call out his name, and asked. How do you know my identity name? Guessed, Kisame. Wuxin answered without looking back, running all the way to the south, while taking out the jade bottle in his collar, removing the cork, and preparing to recover part of the released water. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.